Good morning. Welcome to Moose and Keith on a Thursday right here on the Bettor Sports Network. Mark Malusis, Doc Roto with you, filling in for Keith. It is opening day in Major League Baseball. Happy opening day to everybody. We got a cavalcade of guests that will be coming your way over the course of the next 2 hours. Good morning, Doc. How you doing, bud?
Moose, happy opening day. It's like every team has a shot, even though we know most of them don't, but it's still the beauty of baseball.
It is. There's no question about it. It is the beauty of baseball. There's no doubt about it. And today's a great day. I mean, I honestly, and I think it's unlike anything else that we're going to see across the sport in quite some time in Major League Baseball because of the rule changes, Doc. And you joined Keith and I. We were talking a little fantasy baseball as drafts were abound over the last couple of weeks, and whether it be high money drafts or playing with friends and family, whatever it might be, and the sport this year, Major League Baseball, is going to look considerably different than it has in quite some time, which is exciting. A more of a rhythm to the game, more action, less reliance on the home run, higher batting average, I hope, more strikeouts, elimination of the shift, more stolen bases. You were mentioning 10 to 15% rise in stolen bases across the sport. Going back to way that maybe the sport looked 20, 30 years ago, when it was really the most popular sport in America.
Baseball is stuck in a position where, so for example, Moose, I went to a spring training game with my son, little Roto, and my father-in-law. My father-in-law is going to be 87 years old this year. Okay.
Right.
He likes his baseball in a certain way. He doesn't like the pitch clock. He doesn't like all these changes. But my son, he's on his phone during a baseball game. Why? Because it's slow and it's boring, and he likes the NBA and he likes things that move faster. So baseball had to make a shift. And I think this was a good step in the right direction. The games were too long. They've got to fit in for TV, right? They got to make their money there that way. So I think this is the beginning of, I don't want to say a paradigm shift, but I think a shift towards making the game more attractive to people and something where the youth will be more interested because they're not right now.
Yeah, and listen, I think you're dead on correct. I think that's where it's about. It's about to generate more fans. Now the question is, Doc, I mean, you're a huge baseball fan. I'm a huge baseball fan. What's real, what's not? Like, how do you think it plays out this year when we see the impact of the rule changes? Do you think we see it, or it's an immediate impact, or do you think it's a gradual rise or change that we see over the course of the season? Like, when do you think the best version of this year's game is going to be?
Well, sure, later in the year when guys get used to it, right? So they'll find that rhythm.
Even with spring training?
Yeah, and look, I think the key thing is the stolen bases, because it was becoming station to station, and that was great for Billy Beane and Moneyball, but not so great for the fans. And then secondly, I think it really is a lot about time. You don't want to go to the park for 3 hours and 42 minutes watching 18 pitching changes, 17 pickoff moves. If you can get in and out of the park in 2 hours and 45 minutes, that's what families want nowadays. So I really think the time is going to be big, and you're going to see the time be shaved down dramatically, which I think helps the game on the whole.
Yeah, I think it does. Do you think the action, lack thereof, or do you think pace of play was the bigger issue?
I think both. I mean, really, they go hand in hand. You're sitting around with the Earl Weaver offense. You wait for the 3-run home run. When it comes, if you were in the bathroom at the time, you missed something, right? Now you feel like you can't miss any play, right? Is the guy stealing a base? Is the guy getting a hit? You just didn't feel that way before. Before it was like a strikeout or a home run, or, I'm waiting around for something to happen.
Right, for sure. If I had to pick one or the other, if you're the old gun to your head, right? If I had to pick one or the other in terms of the bigger issue to me, I thought it was kind of the lack of action. I think now you're 100% right, it's both, and they're accomplishing both with the rule changes that they put in play. But I think the fact that you've seen, the batting average precipitously drop over the course of the last 20 years, it continues to go down and down and down. And they hope to change that this year. No stolen bases. I mean, not no, but I'm talking about, it's not like you had Vince Coleman and Ricky Henderson days, Willie McGee, those guys, when they were attacking the base paths and getting themselves into scoring position after a walk. So that went by the wayside.
But those Cardinals teams were fun, Moose.
They were
Coleman and
fun.
McGee, they were fun. They were must-watch baseball.
I agree with you. It was fun on the turf. Ozzie Smith. I mean, I enjoyed watching those games. But Doc, you're preaching to the choir. That's when I became a baseball fan. Like I loved watching those games and watching teams do things a little bit differently instead of everything kind of looking the same. Everybody having the analytics departments
Right.
and everybody looking and attacking baseball the same kind of way, whether it be the shifts, the Tampa Bay Rays with the fourth outfielder, whether it be, we can't now with the use of bullpens, we can't be relying on putting, multiple hits together. So therefore, we're going to play for the bloop and the blast. That's what I felt like every team in the sport was doing.
I'm going to put it like this. Math ruined baseball.
It really
Right?
did.
Math ruined baseball because,
It really
well,
did.
this
And
hitter
there's a
doesn't
lot of
like it
smart
here.
men and women that are behind the scenes.
That's right.
But yes, they've ruined the game.
They ruined the game. They ruined the love of the game. The game was a pitcher throwing to a hitter. Now it's the pitcher goes in the dugout, and trust me, I know former major league players. They would tell you they'd go in and they have all the data. They know exactly where to throw, and the catchers study it up. I mean, so it takes the when you go to Little League baseball, and trust me, we got a lot of good players down here in South Florida. Okay, I know a bunch of major leaguers down here. They didn't do that. You don't start with analytics when you're 8 years old. You play for the fun of the game. As you get older, it becomes more technical, and fantasies become more analytical. I mean, look at all these math guys winning leagues.
Right. And you're not wrong about that. Now people are going to say, well, guys, I mean, they're just trying to improve the game. They're trying to gain a competitive edge. They're the haves and the have-nots, major markets and small markets, right? So the Tampa Bay Rays can't spend like the Los Angeles Dodgers or the Yankees or now the Mets or, throw in the San Diego Padres and you wouldn't consider San Diego to be a major market team, but they spend like they're a major market team, Doc. So you look at those scenarios and you say, well, these teams have got to do something a little bit different. Therefore, the advanced analytics and what they were doing to either grade out players, grade out talent, how you win games and gain a competitive edge against teams that maybe they weren't nearly as talented as.
I think you said something when you were getting there that also troubles me about baseball. If we looked at each team, we could probably rule out half the league from winning.
Yeah.
And that is a big problem. See, the NFL doesn't have that problem because they have this salary cap that if you have a clever guy as a general manager and a salary cap manager, all of a sudden the Bengals go from, stinky to great. And, that can happen. In baseball, it doesn't. The rich get richer. And when I say rich, I mean rich. I mean the Yankees, the Mets, the Dodgers. I mean, these teams, how are they ever going to be bad? Maybe they have injuries, but outside of injuries, and even if they do, they'll just get a couple more players in, Moose. It's a big problem in baseball.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, it's a huge issue when you look at competitive balance, but I don't know necessarily sure how Major League Baseball is going to fix it. I mean, they've got an RSN problem. We know that with Bally's and Diamond Sports and all that, and the collapse of that as they filed for bankruptcy. So they've got an issue when it comes to that. And we're not knocking the product. It's just a matter of trying to gain the interest. I mean, you look at the viewership across Major League Baseball, there's some cities where, on any given night, on average, 4 or 5 cities where less than 16,000 people in those cities are watching those games on a regional sports network. Now, listen, I don't want to be gloom and doom. It's opening day. We love Major League Baseball, but I don't disagree with you, Doc, parity is the word. It works in the National Football League. We just watched in the NCAA tournament where we're going to watch the national semifinals in a couple days down in Houston, where it's FAU against San Diego State and Miami against UConn. It's the first time since like 1970 that the top 2-3 seeds in each region didn't make it to the Final Four. So we see all that, and then you look at Major League Baseball and you're wrong. What about if you wake up this morning, you're a Pirate fan, you're an Oakland A's fan, you're one of these teams that a Washington National fan where their over-under number, I think, is sitting at like 60 or 61. What do you do if you're a fan of one of those teams?
Yeah. So I could not agree with you more. Could not agree with you more. I'm all about contraction. Honestly, if you get rid
They're
of
talking about
teams,
expansion, Doc. They
yeah,
would
you're talking about-
expand.
I know it's a terrible idea. And look, just understand this, okay? Go to a baseball game. Do you see a lot of young kids there? I think you see more older people than younger people at games. Okay. And that tells you everything you need to know about where baseball is going. Take a look at the demographics of who plays fantasy baseball versus fantasy football, Moose. It's dramatic. Kids in middle school play fantasy football. Secretaries in their office pools play fantasy football. They don't play fantasy baseball. It's a lot of work. because you have to know the minor leagues. You have to know all the players. I'm just saying sports betting has to be very involved in baseball. I think prop betting has to get involved in baseball. I just worry for the future of baseball in the next 30 years. I worry about the future of baseball. I truly do.
Yeah, let's see how the impact this year. Let's look at it this year when you look at it and you look at the sport and you look at all things and I'm excited for it, Doc. I really am. Like I think it's going to impact fantasy leagues. Obviously, I think it's going to impact when you're watching games. And the enjoyment of watching the game, the fact that maybe games range at the topping out at maybe 2:45, maybe 3 hours. We're not going 3.5, 3:45 because that's a difficult sell when you look at it. But I'd venture to guess this is probably the most anticipated baseball season in quite some time. And I'm not knocking the talent of the league in years gone by. I'm just looking at the overall quality of the play because it's going to be completely different than we've seen in really, I don't know, 20, 30 years.
This is a pivotal year for baseball. And I think you encapsulated it correctly. This is a pivotal year. If they can build on these rule changes, I think there's a real shot to get people watching. Because right now, the viewership is going this way. They need it to rise. So this is a pivotal year. Make the game more fun, make the game more exciting, make the game more interesting, get more eyeballs on it.
Yeah, that's it. Now, when you look at the overall, when I ask you, Doc, in terms of teams that you think could win a World Series this year, when you look at Major League Baseball, American League and National League combined, how many teams at the start of it? We know it's a long season. We know this is day one. Rosters are going to change, adjust, injuries are going to happen. But when you're looking at the overall complexion of baseball right now, how many teams do you think can win a World Series?
Being generous, because I'm a generous man. I'm a glass half full.
Yeah, why not?
Guy. Okay. 7 in each 14, but that's being really generous.
Wow. Yeah. I would go probably a little less.
I was being generous. I'm a generous guy.
You were being, I get it. I would
probably I'm throwing the Mariners in there, right? I'm throwing the Astros in there. I'm throwing 3 teams in the AL East in there, right? I'm throwing the Twins in there. I'm being very, very generous here, Moose. And probably in the NL, there's fewer, honestly. Probably in the NL, there's maybe 5. So maybe 12 to 14.
Well, in the NL, you'd look at the Cardinals, the Padres, the Dodgers, the Mets, the Phillies, and the Braves.
6.
Yeah, it's probably it.
Right? So somewhere between 12 and 14.
I can't put the Brewers on that line. There's nobody else. I mean, I know a lot of people are kind of bullish on the Arizona Diamondbacks being young, dynamic, but I don't think they're going to be that team this year. Maybe a year from now, maybe 2 years from now, we're talking about the Arizona Diamondbacks being one of those teams. Yeah, I think that's pretty much the list. And that's a Mets team that needs to replace Edwin Diaz. And that's a Mets team that's probably a little bit of a back short. It's a Phillies team that's going to miss Bryce Harper till at least at some point post-June. Right. Hoskins is done for the year with the torn ACL. So you throw, that into the mix. The Braves have got to make sure that when Vaughn Grissom, gets the call up to replace Dansby Swanson at shortstop, he's good to go. But the Braves are the team that everyone counts on in that American League East. And then you've got the St. Louis Cardinals in the National League Central and the 2 teams out west. And I love them. I'm curious what your take is on the San Diego Padres. They've spent a lot of money, a lot of flash. AJ Preller out there attacking and, bringing one superstar in after another. We know that town has embraced them because the Chargers leaving and joining Los Angeles and going to Los Angeles from an NFL perspective. So it's Padres all over the place when you go to the town of San Diego or the city of San Diego. What's your take on the Padres this year, who's sitting there, I think, at about 5-1 to win the NL pennant?
Before I get to the Padres, I want to touch on the Braves. Deep organization. They've got young pitching. They drafted 2 pitchers in the draft this year in the first round, who I promise you, if they were on another team, they'd be up in a year or 2. That's how deep the Braves are. They're a wonderful team. The Padres, I love the Padres, Moose. I'm excited about the Padres. I drafted Kim in a lot of leagues. I know that sounds crazy, but I wanted every bat I could find. And he qualifies at 3 different positions, going to get double-digit home runs and double-digit steals. I like Cronenworth. I mean, how do you not like Soto, Machado? I mean, this is a murderer's Bogarts. This is a murderer's row lineup. You got really good pitching. You got a good bullpen. This team is built to win. Now, here's my only fear with San Diego, and it was much like the Florida Marlins of many, many years ago. When Wayne Huizenga didn't find the results, he got rid of everybody. If the Padres don't win this year, do they break up this team? That would be sad to me because this team is a juggernaut.
Yeah, I mean the Padres are, and you're not wrong about that. They would be. It's. Do you think Soto has a big bounce back year this year, Doc?
Yeah. Soto, Tatis, Machado. I mean, are you kidding me? Bogarts. Tell me the weak spot on this team. Catcher. All right, that's a problem. But this team is deep all over the place. They've got really good pitching. I like Nick Martinez and Seth Lugo. What did Seth Lugo ever do wrong for the Mets? Nothing.
No, they messed around with him, starter, reliever. He had a little bit of health issue, but there was one point in time in terms of if you go back 3 years ago when Seth Lugo was right, there was one point where he was one of the better relievers in all the National League.
Yeah, he's a long reliever and he was really good.
He was
So
really good.
really good. So I mean, this is a team that I think the general manager is doing a sensational job there. It's a tough division. The Dodgers or the Padres will be a wild card. That's mind blowing, right? That is truly mind blowing because both these teams deserve to win this division. But we'll have to see. But I mean, I really am a big Padre fan. Blake Snell is a big part to me. When he was with Tampa, they literally threw him 4 innings.
I
How
know.
many innings does this guy get now? Because he can't go seven.
Well, that's
So
where the analytics drive you crazy because they're all looking at spin rates. Third time through a lineup, spin rates. What's the spin rate in the first inning? What's it in the fifth or sixth inning? It's like the lack of trust. Like we've seen, Doc, like we love sports. And what drives me, and I'm not telling you, like I'm completely against analytics. I hate the term process over results because, I mean, we're all in the results oriented business, whether it be, generating ratings, interest, whether it be winning baseball games, football games, hockey games. You could have the greatest process in the world. If it doesn't yield the results, well, then something's wrong with the process. So, I mean, they are connected, but you could be happy with your process, but it needs to lead to results. So I'm not completely against analytics, but there's been a lack of trust in the professional athlete to what's ticking inside. Can they be able to find a pitch, dig down late, to be able to trust the competitive nature of an individual instead of just leaning on what your analytics department is telling you about spin rate and drop in a breaking pitch.
but common sense tells you the more times a batter sees a pitcher,
Sure,
they're going to get a beat on him, right? And Blake Snell has shown that he's not the most durable guy in his career.
for sure.
So you say to yourself, if he can make it through the lineup twice,
He's
and
good.
let's say we're winning two nothing, let's get him out there. We'll get our bullpen in. We'll try to finish this. You
Well,
and I are saying maybe Blake could get another inning or two. But now baseball is such a long season. And by the way, that is my biggest gripe. Maybe I'll save that for another show. But I believe baseball should end on August 31st. I do. I think baseball competing with football is a monumental disaster because people start watching football and not watching baseball. And I think you would be able to pitch Blake Snell an extra 2 innings if the season ended on August 31st.
well, you're talking about this regular season or in the
Yeah,
entire year? Oh, the
regular
regular
season.
season. So then
Yep.
the postseason is in September, not October.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because in October, you're in week 8 of football or week 7 of football. And this America has shown you we want football. I'm
Oh, no
not, try-
doubt.
I'm not
It's
trying to be
like
disrespectful to baseball people, but that's what we have spoken. We want football.
no, it's listen, it's a runaway train when you look at the National Football League, the amount of money that they make year in and year out, the amount of money that they generate, the television contracts that they have, the easy way that it is to bet and play fantasy football each and every week. It's amazing when you look at it. So no question about it. I totally and wholeheartedly agree with you. So yeah, I mean, baseball can't compete with the NFL. I don't know if we're going to get to the point where they start ending the season on August 31st. I like the idea. I mean, and
Right.
I know some people have been like, well, cut down on the regular season, go from 162 to something else.
Yeah.
But this year is
If you do that, Moose, and
yeah.
you contract a couple of teams, I kid you not, the product will be so much better. And then you'll have the playoffs in the month of September, and eyeballs will be on those playoffs. Because what happens is, ask yourself this question: you like baseball? You watching football or baseball when it comes to the month of September and October?
Am I watching football or baseball? Honestly, I'm watching both, Doc, and what I do. Like
Okay, sure,
you and
that's what
I
we do for a living, right?
right, you and I do this for a living. So like I'm probably not the right guy to ask
But
because
I'm 80 to 90% football, 10 to 20 baseball. If I'm not competing in my leagues in baseball, I'm not paying attention in that last month. I'm
right.
moving into football.
So, okay. So, what I do and working at Picks and being like their lead sports anchor is like if the Mets and the Yankees are playing relevant baseball games at the end, we're locked into that. Not on
Right.
NFL Sundays when the Jets and the Giants are playing for sure, but throughout the course of the week and when you're getting ready potentially for playoff baseball, Yankees and Stros last year, Yankees and Guardians, and yeah, the Mets obviously getting eliminated by the Padres in the wild card round. But I listen, we're outliers. I think the majority of the people that aren't doing what we do, I think you're right. I think for the most part, especially in a place where your team's been eliminated for months, where you had literally no chance, your attention turns to the National
Right.
Football League.
You watching the Pirates? Or you watching the Steelers?
No doubt,
Are,
you're watching the
right.
Steelers.
Are you
Or
watching the A's? Or are you watching the 49ers?
right, you
I mean,
might
this
be.
is
I'll
not
be
hard.
honest with you, you might be watching exhibition Penguins hockey in
Yeah.
Pittsburgh more so than you're watching the Pirates. I mean,
Right. So,
we're
I mean,
paying
think about
attention to
those
their
cities.
training camp when it gets going in September.
Right. So I mean, think about that. I mean, there are cities there. Tampa, you think the Tampa Rays fans are pretty decent fans, but they're watching the Bucks. So I'm just throwing out there. And that's a good baseball team.
That
Right.
is.
Even the good baseball teams, they're
They've got a
not
terrible
necessarily
place to
watching.
play, but yes,
Oof.
you're no doubt about it. They're a good baseball team.
Have you ever been there?
No, I've been to Tampa for spring training with the Yankees. I've not
Okay.
gone to the Trop.
Yeah. Go to the Trop and be on one side of the Trop. And then your friend could be maybe, I don't know, on the other side and just scream to him. He'll hear you.
So it's that bad of a ballpark.
It's not bad of a ballpark.
Yeah, they need a new stadium, but that we've been talking about that for a while when you're looking at Major League Baseball.
Well, you
They
can't do an outdoor stadium there because it rains literally every day from June until through October.
Yeah, so I'm not saying outdoor stadium, but you got to have something a little bit more of a zest, or you could have a retractable roof. You could
Mm,
do something like that to where maybe one day you're actually getting the sun down in Tampa, and you can let the sun shine through if you're a Tampa Bay instead of going to that dome. But they don't make any excuses down there, and when they're good, people show up. When they're bad, people don't show up. But you see
right.
that all across Major League Baseball. When the Mets and the Yankees, they're not drawing 4 million fans here in New York. If they're going to throw out a bad baseball team, people aren't going to show up. Tickets are going to be decreased, and they're going to be on sale. So you see that, but I don't disagree with you. We're kind of getting into a general conversation about Major League Baseball, and I'm excited for first pitch and games getting going right around 1 o'clock Eastern time. Are you done with all your drafts, Doc?
Oh, done. Way done. So today, dude, I'm doing DFS lineups. You could check my FanDuel and DraftKings lineups. I'm doing prop bets on Prize Picks. I like the Max Fried over and out. It was 17 and a half. I think he gets 18. And DFS lineups, I like a twin stack against Zach Greinke. I'm all in on that one.
How much have you, can I ask you a question? How much time do you invest on a day in, day out basis when you're looking at DFS stuff?
Um, hmm, to do it properly, couple hours,
Yeah, to do it
right?
properly. Well,
Couple
yeah. I mean,
hours.
you're a competitive guy. You
Yeah,
win a lot. You're
yeah,
really respected in the industry. Like you
right,
do amazing work, and
right.
people love your advice. So I'm just so
Couple
couple
hours a day. Yeah.
couple hours a day you're
Well, what
spending on.
happens is before the lineups come out, you're trying to get an idea of who's pitching, right? And so because you always know who the probable pitchers are. And then you start looking at what lineups, what you're thinking. And then when the lineups come out, because I'm always checking, right? The lineups. And then once
Yeah,
they come out, you figure out where the lineups are, how they fit, because you want to try to get at least one stack in. You know what I mean by a stack? You want the 2, 3, 4, 6 guys on a certain lineup, and then you start filling in around that. So to me, it's a big puzzle. People play Sudoku. I play DFS. I like it for my brain. I like my brain working that way. I like thinking about the different pieces and how they all fit.
I like that. Yeah. And so okay, so you spend a couple hours every day. What's the biggest when you're going into day one? Is it a slow build for you, Doc, or are you all in? Like, do you want to?
Man.
Because sometimes, like early on in the NFL, I'll draw a comparison for myself. I like to get a little bit of a feel of what's going on before I'm like playing off what I saw in in the exhibition or what I'm reading about other teams. Like week 1, week 2, kind of get a feel of teams before maybe then I start to really dive in. Are you one with that with Major League Baseball where you want to see things settle in? Or are you like hitting the ground running day one?
Yes and no to that answer. And here's why. Remember, we live in an analytical world where the DFS sharks are in their mom's basement right now with their algorithms on their
Yes.
computers as we speak,
Yeah.
literally as we speak, right? Now, our advantage
I
as
can tell.
baseball guys
Yeah.
is that we know the players before they do. We have like a 2-week head start. So, for example, Will Benson, the new center fielder for the Reds, dude in his mom's basement doesn't know him yet because he's not in the algorithm yet because they haven't seen him play enough. In 2 weeks, after like 10 games, they'll know what he does and start projecting him. So right now, I can get Will Benson for $2,000. In another week, he may cost me $3,000. So I've got to take advantage of what I know from seasonal fantasy, and I've got to take advantage of that now, because in another 3 weeks, I won't have that advantage again.
Gotcha. That's fair enough. I mean, when you look at it, that is fair enough. Okay, so what's your best play today when you're looking at fantasy? When you're looking at baseball, your best DFS play that you love today?
Yeah, twin stack against Zach Greinke. I think Carlos Correa, Byron Buxton sounds. I mean, Greinke, there's no way the guy goes more than 5 innings. What does he get? 3 strikeouts. So when you have a guy that doesn't get a lot of strikeouts, he's going to leave the ball over the plate. I think the Twins maul him today. I think Joey Gallo could hit a home run too.
Buxton's one of those guys that when we did our fantasy draft here through RT Sports on Bettor Sports Network, was one of those guys. I think Ernie Acosta, I forget who drafted him. I think Ernie might have drafted him. I forget. But is one of those guys that's interesting for the Minnesota Twins. Like, I'm a big Correa fan. I know he's got the ankle injury. I know he failed the physicals with the Giants. We all do, obviously, in the Mets, and then ended up going back to Minnesota, Doc. But Buxton's one of those guys that if he stays healthy, now that's the big question, if he could have a huge year, like be an MVP. He's not going to hit 60 plus home runs, but he has the talent to be, a 35 plus home run guy.
If I had wheels, Moose, I'd be a wagon.
I always loved my red wagon growing up. I used to drag it around, put the stuff in it, everything like that around my mom's house. It was great.
Did you have a big wheel too, Moose? Did you have a big wheel going around?
Yeah, no doubt about it. Who didn't love the big wheel? And then you'd go down the hill. Your friends would dare you, go down the big hill on the big wheel, and it would never be able to handle it. You lose control, and you basically wipe out at the end of the hill, go sprawling over the pavement.
It's the best.
You get what I'm talking about?
Yes.
The big wheel was great. Guys would try and ride it like on the surfboard and everything like that. There's no
big plastic piece of junk. But yeah, Buxton is a guy it's like DeGrom. So long as he's healthy, so long as he's playing, you try to get him in your lineup. But his prize picks home run is 30.5. I'm taking the under on that. I mean, if he was healthy, I'm taking the over, but I don't know whether he gets, the full slate of games. So I'll go under.
Which one is there a team this year, Doc? Before we go to break, and then we're going to talk a little NFL draft. Russell Brown's going to join us. But if you had to pick, I'll give you, pick of the litter. Team you're fading most this year in 2023 in Major League Baseball would be whom? Mine would be the Dodgers.
Really? You're fading the Dodgers?
I am a little bit, because I think if the Padres, we're both kind of bullish on San Diego. Like, there's a lot to like about San Diego. I think they win the NL West. I don't know. I'm not telling you. I think there's going to be a little bit of a regression. Not a big one. Like, I don't think they're going to miss the playoffs, but I think there's just going to be a little regression for Los Angeles. What would be a team you think you would fade this year?
I'll stay out west. I'll fade the Giants. The Giants always end up hanging around somewhere and hang out in a wild card spot. I don't see it. Playing the Dodgers and Padres, that many games, I just don't like the Giants pitching staff enough. I like Logan Webb. I don't like the hitters that much, so I'll fade the Giants completely.
All right, going to give you 2 teams in the American League, Mariners or Blue Jays. Everyone that I talk to, they all love, like, Toronto. This is the year. We're a year too early with Toronto. We talked about you the other day. You said a really sharp fantasy guy that he's drafting Bo Bichette all over the place. Toronto or Seattle, one of those 2 teams. Who do you think ends up living up to expectations?
Both, but I'll take Toronto, but both live up to expectations. The Mariners are being built really well. I love what they're doing. They've got this kid, Andres Munoz, in the bullpen. If this guy becomes a closer, do you remember?
Yes.
That's what we're looking at here.
I remember when Armando Benitez got into the brawl at Yankee Stadium in the Bronx. Remember that? And then Darryl Strawberry's throwing haymakers in the dugout. Yeah. That was fantastic.
Benitez a big dude. I don't know about that.
Oh, no, he was. I know. But Darryl's like 6'5", 6'6", whatever Straw is.
And maybe had some things in him to help him throw things. You know what I'm saying?
We'll come back. We're going to be joined by Russell Brown, NFL draft analyst for Fantasy Pros. He will join us next. He's Doc Roto. I'm Mark Malusis. The show is Moose and Keith on a Thursday right here, Bettor Sports Network.
Talk about your picks and your fantasy teams on Bettor Sports Network.
The importance of checking out the site that you're playing on. Default rankings of these sites. A lot of times they don't get updated. I know from experience. I used to write default rankings for the NFBKC, the basketball version of the NFBC. I'd write these default rankings in June for the NBA. Before the NBA draft, before free agency opened up. And guess what? I was never asked to write an update article or update the default rankings. This happens a lot. Maybe if there's something obvious, it gets updated. Aaron Judge, for some reason, hurts his back. Maybe they make that change. Just maybe. But you don't know that. And that's why it's just so important that you show up to your draft room or you do that pre-draft prep. We're all busy. We know we're about to devote a lot of time to our fantasy baseball drafts. Why not spend the extra 20 to 25 minutes to invest properly in your team, to go and see which of those players are way down default rankings? They're going to be different on all of these sites, and you're going to be looking at them and going, maybe their analysts think a certain player who shouldn't be in the top 100, who should be maybe even not even the top 200, will be in that top 100. You got to check that out. You got to know where you're playing, just like you got to know your format when you sign up for the league. It's just so crucial, and people just skip right over it. You think it's cool to show up to the draft room 3 minutes before the draft. Well, number one, it's not cool because the commissioner's trying to make sure it is organized, especially me, who runs auctions. You can't, it's one thing if someone doesn't show up for the snake draft, oh well, doesn't ruin it for everyone. Auctions, you can't have someone not show up. Auto bidding, auto auctioning, it ruins the sanctity of those drafts here, which is why I always recommend, hey, make it easy on your commissioner. Don't make them send those texts there. It's annoying. You shouldn't have to do that. Don't wait till the last minute and get in there about 20, 25 minutes before so you can just look up and down the entire default rankings list so you can make a queue out of that, Ron. And the reason I keep saying this is because people still show up 2, 3 minutes before the draft, and that's it. In fact, in one of my auctions, people were asking me where certain players were, and I go, did you search their name? No, I just got in. Well, that's no excuse right there. That's your own fault. I mean, you're organized, so you're a hard person to ask here.
You're getting those questions. This is your preschool league, right? People don't know how to search player names.
People freak out. They don't think. That's the problem. Because they show up 2 minutes before the draft. That's why.
The Playbook with Fensty and Ronis, presented by FantasyAlarm.com. Weekdays at 5 Eastern on Bettor Sports Network. It's Moose and Keith with Mark Malusis and Keith Irizarry.
It is opening day in Major League Baseball. We'll continue to break it down and talk a little bit about MLB, but let's talk a little NFL right now because we're being joined by Russell Brown, the NFL draft analyst for Fantasy Pros. Russell, good to chat with you. He's Doc Roto. I'm Mark Malusis. Thanks for the time this morning.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on. I didn't know if I was doing NFL draft today or if I was going to talk Kentucky Derby with Moose today. I wasn't sure.
We got a lot. We got Florida Derby this weekend. We got a lot of Derby preps. Have you picked the Derby horse yet, Russell?
I kind of like Forte. I think that's the horse that I might roll with through this whole thing. We'll see. I mean, he's coming off a good 4 furlong workout, 49 seconds there, but we'll kind of see. I mean, he's 5-6 in his career, so I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I saw him schooling yesterday down at Gulfstream Park. Saw the video of that. He looked like an absolute monster. So Forte for Todd Pletcher. We got to get you on right around the Derby and get your Derby picks as well. Let's talk a little NFL draft. Let's start with the quarterbacks here. Who do you think Carolina moved up to 1 to get?
Well, I mean, I know the betting favorite on most betting sites from DraftKings to FanDuel have CJ Stroud is the top guy, and it makes sense, right? I mean, he's so consistent, he's very accurate, and he's had a great pre-draft workout. I mean, he is somebody that has done a phenomenal job being able to, work at the combine, work at his pro day. But personally, I think all attention should be on the eyes in Florida today at Anthony Richardson's pro day. He's the only quarterback at 6'4", and I do understand there's a lot of raw to his game. He's not as far along as Stroud or Young, but I really think Anthony Richardson, the traits are there, the athleticism is there. I think ultimately through my mock draft process so far, I've been putting Anthony Richardson, and we'll see if that ends up being the guy when we get a little bit closer.
Russell, I have 2 questions for you. One, is Forte named after Matt Forte, the former Chicago Bears running back? And then 2, I watched Anthony Richardson. I live down in Florida. I have lived the Anthony Richardson experience. Let me just tell you, it's a roller coaster ride. It kind of makes you nauseous every now and then.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, if you look at his box scores, he performed the worst in the biggest spots. You play Georgia and you throw for 197 yards and no touchdowns. What are you doing in the NFL on a Sunday? I know Florida had a shaky line. I get that, but walk me through how that's the number one pick.
Well, I'm glad that you bring up that game, because that's one of the games that I talk about most through the process with Richardson. Early in that game, he took a shot to his lower body. I don't know if it was his knee or his ankle, and he ended up missing a couple of plays in a series early on, and he battled back and battled through whatever that injury was. And I think that's part of the reason to why maybe some of the success didn't happen per se in that game, just simply because you could tell the injury was hurting him. The mobility wasn't the same. But when you watch the grand scheme of things within his game, the way he operates within the pocket and the way he navigates, how he's able to step up in the pocket, the way he's able to shift side to side, and he can operate off script as well. And obviously the cannon of an arm, a 4.4 40 is phenomenal for a player of his size. To be able to have that, I think is really that he's much further along than people give him credit for. And you kind of hit the nail on the head. The talent around him wasn't great this year. For being as good of a school that Florida should be, the talent was just not there. And I think if you get him into a place like, let's just use Indianapolis, for example, ready-made offensive line, you've got a weapon in Michael Pittman, you've got Jonathan Taylor. I think it's a great system for him to go to Indianapolis. I know I mentioned Carolina, but I think when you look at that, you've got Frank Reich, you've got, the potential with that offensive line. They took Iker Ekwonu last year. I think there's a lot of potential there with Carolina, and a lot of that circles around Frank Reich being able to develop him. So I think that's my biggest thing.
All right, why the lack of buzz around Bryce Young?
Well, I don't think there's a lack of buzz. I think he's kind of gotten lost in the shuffle, and he could very well emerge as the top quarterback. He is the top quarterback on my board. He's a top 5 player for me. And he could very well be the first overall pick. I mean, when you look at where Carolina was represented at the Alabama Pro Day, they were very much there. I mean, every single person within that staff, and they had kind of an interesting bond at that Pro Day. So I think that's something worth looking at. And they could ultimately say, hey, we've got to go safe here. Frank Reich could say, look, I've gone through the quarterback shuffle before. I can't afford to swing big here. I've got to play it safe. I got to go with the most consistent option. And that could be Bryce Young. So I think it's worth looking at. And I think the biggest thing is just with Bryce Young is the overall frame. What's it going to be? I mean, we know he checked in at 204, but can he play at 204 in the NFL? I don't know if he can, but I think maybe 195 is more likely where he's going to be in the NFL. Can he take the hits and the pressure that he's going to get in the NFL?
Russell, I was at lunch last week with Little Roto, and we were watching the Will Levis Pro Day. And this guy has this like Greek god to him, but he also has this like Frankenstein stiffness to me, right? So, I mean, he can throw 80 yards on a rope, but is that going to be enough in the NFL if you're playing with stiff hips? What do you think about Levis? Is he a top 5, top 6 pick?
I don't think he is. I mean, I think he's certainly worthy of the discussion for the top 10, top 12 conversation. You look at Tennessee at 11, potentially a team maybe like Tampa Bay moving up to potentially get him. I think there's some really interesting fits there. I like Will Levis, and he has done a phenomenal job putting 8 to 10 pounds of muscle on from his, playing through the injuries that he had this past year. And I think that's why some of the regression happened. But he is somebody that he has the tools. He's got the base. He's got the arm strength, the throwing motion. It's all there. He can fit balls into tight windows. But when his lower body is out of whack, his upper body is not together. When his lower body's good, his upper body's not good. It's just that the overall technique, the consistent base is not there. And it takes time to work with that. And I think he is somebody that as he continues, and then you mentioned stiffness, as he continues to add all this weight and muscle, that's only going to make him a little bit more stiff. I mean, and that's my biggest concern with him. And while he's incredibly tough, he's mobile. I love the skill set for him, but I think he's somebody that's going to take some time to get accustomed to the NFL. Could he go top 5, top 6? Absolutely. But just for me, I personally wouldn't do that just yet. I would bet more so on an Anthony Richardson or something like that.
We're chatting here with Russell Brown, doing a great job, NFL draft analyst for Fantasy Pros. All right, Russell, let's lean into it a little bit as far as wide receiver. Doc is a huge fantasy player. I like playing fantasy football. If I'm looking at this draft class when I'm looking at wide receiver, who are the two most impactful guys? I know it depends on where they land and situation, I get, but if you had to bank on two guys that are going to have huge years as wideouts coming in out of this draft class, who would that be?
Yeah, I'll start with Jackson Smith and Jigba from Ohio State, just kind of following that trend that we've seen over the last several years from Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, players like that have done a really good job translating to the NFL. And he comes in at 6'1", 196 at the combine. He runs a 6.57 3-cone drill. He ran a sub 4.540 at his pro day. It was a 4.47. One scout told me it was a 4.48. So give or take, I mean, a tenth of a second, no big deal. But the 6.57 is what matters most, because Jackson Smith is somebody that fits today's game as a player that can play versatile. You know, he's versatile. He can play in a variety of spots, from playing as an X. He can play in the slot. I love the pre-snap motions that you can utilize him for, with orbit motions and jet motions. And that 6.57 3-cone drill is important because he's not a straight line speed kind of guy, but he's very shifty after the catch. And I think that's the important thing with him, is that he can wiggle. He's got some moves. So I think that's the key, is somebody that's going to pick in the top 15, looking for a receiver. I really like the fit for him to potentially go to Atlanta. We'll see if that happens at 8. It's a little rich, but I think it's a great landing spot for him, because he can potentially become a great number 2, potentially a number 1 there with Drake London. Then the other player, Zay Flowers out of Boston College. He put 13 pounds of muscle, from the combine into his pro day. He's done a phenomenal job putting on weight. He ran a 4.42, had a 35.5-inch vertical, and that matches the explosiveness that we see on tape. But he's just a vicious route runner, like a violent route runner. His feet are violent. He's very snappy. He throttles down very well and kind of shows the ability to move in and out of his breaks well. The vertical threat ability is there. So I think he's going to be a first-round pick. He might not be the first or second receiver off the board, but I think there's a lot of value there for fantasy perspective.
By the way, if JSN goes to the Falcons, I will scream. Because they have no quarterback to throw him the football. Now, here's my question for you.
Desmond Ridder?
Yeah, right. Okay. I can throw farther than Desmond Ridder. I promise you that. Now, here's my question. In the old days, we'd have a bunch of running backs go in the first round. But now it feels like maybe one, maybe Bijan, maybe Gibbs, maybe. But wide receivers, we could probably, if I asked you, you probably could tell me 4 or 5 would go in the first round. Do you see that happening again this year?
Yeah, I think there's a chance that we see potentially 2 running backs at most this year. Bijan Robinson will be a first rounder for sure. Is Jahmyr Gibbs somebody that's going to end up going in the first round, potentially, maybe in the back end? But other than that, yeah, we're going to see at least 3 receivers in this first round, probably 4. And I think obviously that the numbers just show that's more than running backs. And that's just the value of the position, right? Like running backs, everybody's terrified of the contact and the hits, and rightfully so. I mean, you're bringing these guys in essentially for 5 years, because you get that 5th-year option in the first round, and you want them to play for that tenure, but also, can you get a second contract out of them? It's more likely to get that second contract out of a receiver.
Do you think is Bijan Robinson first year is what, if you had a guess or give us a kind of an estimation, what his impact is, how many yards, how many touchdowns, depending on the spot? Like, how good do you think Bijan Robinson's going to be from the word go?
Yeah, I think he's going to be great. I think if he goes to a place like Philadelphia at 10, I think they're the team that has the luxury with 2 first-round picks to take him at 10. They lost Miles Sanders. They really had no interest in bringing him back at the price tag that Carolina brought him in at. So I think when you look at Bijan with Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, the weapons that are there in Philadelphia, he could come in and get easily 250-plus touches, and I would say close to 1,300 to 1,400 yards, total offense, from, maybe 1,000 to 1,100 yards rushing to a couple hundred yards receiving, because he is that type of back. I love the lateral movements from him and the burst at the second level.
Russell, who is this year's Pacheco, right? This year's 4th-round running back, maybe 5th-round running back, or this year's Elijah Mitchell, the guy that people are passing on, but they become fantasy stars?
Yeah, I think that's going to be, and I'm going to butcher the name, so bear with me, but he's a kid out of Brooklyn, New York. He played at the University of Pitt. That's Israel Abanikanda.
Yeah. Abanikanda forever. Yeah, he's good.
Yeah, he's somebody that at 5'10", 216, he ran a 4.4 240, a sub 4.4 240 at the pro day yesterday. I mean, 41-inch vertical. I'm trying to find comparisons, and I don't know if I can find anybody.
You think he lasts around 4 and 5? Because that workout was tremendous.
It's possible, and the reason why I say that is just because, if only Robinson goes in the first round, now you're talking about Zach Charbonnet, Gibbs in the second round. I think he is somebody that maybe just kind of slips into that third round just simply because of the overall position, other values at the draft. I mean, it's a deep corner draft, it's a deep edge rusher class. There's a lot of second and third round receivers as well. So he might get lost in the shuffle, but there's a lot to like with his game. He's got that one cut, jump cut ability where he can just take it to the house. And I love the overall skill set of him. And I think if you could compare somebody to Pacheco, he's probably the closest as overall style. He's not going to go in the 7th round like Pacheco. When you talk about day 2 picks, he's probably going to be that guy.
Russell, is there a quarterback outside the top 4 that's going to be this year's Brock Purdy that all of a sudden, lands and you're like, wow, he can actually play, and he was a 5th, 6th, or 7th round pick?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to pound the table for Max Duggan. I mean, I think he is somebody that will probably go in the 6th or 7th round, but I'm not a big fan. I would say Hendon Hooker, but he's not going to go that late. He's going to be more so the 4th or 5th quarterback off the board, depending on who you talk to. Some mock drafts have him going in the top 5, which I think is a little crazy, but at 6'3", 217, I mean, coming off a torn ACL, he is 25, but as you look later in the year, if you get to, a place where 7 or 8 games pass and you're looking for this guy to play, 9 or 10 games down the stretch, I think he could do so because one, he'll be fully healthy, but he's really good between the years. He's great on the chalkboard. He understands what he's looking at. So I think he's a great fit for a lot of teams.
Moose, how many times can a fan base say, I need a hooker?
Yeah. Well, I've been married 15 years, so.
No, I think the Viking fans would love this guy. Vikings would love Hooker. And, I like Kirk Cousins, but if you bring in Hooker right now, you've got a little time for Kirk Cousins to mentor him. I watched this kid play at Tennessee, as opposed to Richardson, who played his worst in big games. Hooker played his best in big games.
Yeah, absolutely. He did. And it's one of those things where I think with Hendon Hooker, he's somebody that's just got so much experience. He might never get to this level in the NFL, but he's going to be consistent across the board. It's going to be what you see, what you get every day, and you know what you're getting. And I think teams across the league really like that. And I would keep tabs on the Detroit Lions as well. They did a lot of work with him down at the Senior Bowl when I was down there in Mobile. So I think there's a chance there that they could really look into that.
Okay, last one for me, Russell, would be this. Who's the riser? If I had to ask you a guy right now, take it at, it doesn't necessarily have to be a guy that's going to impact fantasy next year. It could just be anybody. But who do you think? Because there always seems to be 1 or 2 guys that go from, hey, 2 months ago they were a 2nd or 3rd round pick. Now they're at the tail end of the first round, middle part of the first round. Or is there anybody there that you look at that you think is going to pinpoint, that you think is really going to rise up draft boards as we're going through all these pro days?
Yeah, I think there's 2 guys. Nolan Smith out of Georgia, the edge rusher. Not really much into the fantasy perspective there unless you're doing like IDP or something like that. But at 6'2", 238, he is very violent at the point of attack. He loves to get physical. He'll blow up split zone blocks at ease. He's somebody that can play in a variety of spots. We've seen him bump down to a 4-eye. He'll stand up off the edge as a 6 or a 7 technique. He can even play, as kind of a will backer from time to time. So he kind of fits today's game for that hybrid edge rusher and linebacker. And I think there's a lot of teams in the top 15, top 20 that are going to end up taking a look at him. So it wouldn't surprise me if he ended up going sooner than like a Miles Murphy out of Clemson, who I think is one of the 5 or 6 best players in this draft. And then the other one, keep tabs on Jack Campbell out of Iowa. He is, potentially the top linebacker in this class. Trenton Simpson out of Clemson gets a lot of love, and he also gets a lot of hate. I still like Trenton Simpson a lot, but Jack Campbell has been phenomenal through the process at 6'5", 249. He ran a 4.65 40. And when you talk about that length, he ran a 3-cone drill in 6.74 seconds. That's really fluid, and it shows on tape. He can sugar the A gap. He can drop into mid-hook zones as a coverage linebacker. He can blitz. And when you look at the Bills in the back end of the first round, their biggest need right now is linebacker, not weapons for Josh Allen, not protection for Josh Allen. They need a linebacker. Tremaine Edmonds is gone. Jack Campbell is like almost a prototype of Tremaine Edmonds, hopefully, if they swing that route.
Russell, before we let you go, tight ends. There's at least 4 or 5 really good ones this year. Mm-hmm. Any first rounders? Does Kincaid go in round 1? Does Mayer go in round 1? Or are they mostly second day guys?
Yeah, I think both those guys go in the first round. I think Dalton Kincaid is one of the best pass catchers in this draft, just pure pass catchers, always catching away from his body. He kind of fits that modern day tight end for today's game. He's got that vertical threat ability. He can work in the short and intermediate areas of the field with stick routes and things like that. But he's also only had one drop in his career. So you love seeing that from a production standpoint. Michael Mayer, maybe the most overlooked prospect when you talk about just consistent from technique, from his blocking perspective to how he runs his routes, as I mentioned, stick routes and things like that. He is somebody that can do that consistently in the NFL. And I think he's just going to be a plug and play guy. You think like Jason Witten has a long career. Michael Mayer could be kind of similar in that sense. I think there's going to be a lot of teams that are interested in that tight end position. You look at Cincinnati, they added Irv Smith. Only a one-year deal, so they could bring in somebody like a Dalton Kincaid. Michael Mayer would be a great fit, I think, for Green Bay. So I think there's a lot of fits there in the first round.
Russell Brown. Russell, I lied. This is the last one. It's going to be a combination of two things. Number one is if you're the Colts, I put you in the Indianapolis Colts draft or a part of their draft contingent right now. Are you pursuing Lamar Jackson or are you drafting a quarterback?
God, that's such a tough question. I think I would definitely flirt with the idea of Lamar, but it scares me, right? Like the way he's handled this whole situation, I don't like. I don't like that he's starting to miss a lot more football. He's not playing in as many games as he did early on in his career. He's far and away not the same quarterback as he was as an MVP. So I think I'd just go with the rookie quarterback route. I'd be hoping a Stroud or something like that ends up falling in my lap.
Russell, you're awesome. We appreciate it. Fantastic. We got to get you on again right before the NFL draft. Enjoy your work and a continued success for Fantasy Pros. You're on point, and we'll get you on before the Derby as well, Russell.
Appreciate it, guys.
Take care, Russell.
You got it. He was great. I mean, he was. I mean, he did a great job talking about Bijan Robinson. You stick Bijan Robinson with the Philadelphia Eagles with the 10th overall pick, with what you – think about I mean,
I got a chill here in Florida, Moose.
No, Doc,
chill.
Like he would be amazing in Philadelphia. He really would be. I don't know if that's the way they're going to go because they've got some needs. They hemorrhaged players in free agency and lost a ton of guys. I don't know that that's where they.
But
go.
they had backups to a lot of those guys.
That's true.
They had Dean. They had guys that they could fill in. Jordan Davis. I think what Russell said was very on point. You have 2 first-round picks. It's almost like a freebie. Why not take Bijan Robinson? This is your time now. This is your period. Before that you can afford all these guys. You add a little fire there with Bijan. Get into a Super Bowl again and maybe win it.
Yeah, maybe win it. Sanders was terrible in that Super Bowl.
He was terrible before.
Oh, he was terrible. I know. And I was always a Miles Sanders guy. I kind of liked him early on in fantasy. He was pretty good when he stayed healthy, but he was terrible in that game. I'll pose the same question, Doc, that I just posed to Russell to you. If you're the Colts, what do you do? I'm not telling you Lamar's handling everything well, but Lamar wants a fully guaranteed contract, the one that Deshaun Watson, we all know this, that the one that he got from the Cleveland Browns. It would cost you obviously an arm and a leg via trade with the Baltimore Ravens. But he's also a guy that was a former MVP of the league. You have to do it a little bit differently with Lamar Jackson. Given the compilation of where the Colts are, Jim Irsay obviously saying he's not in favor of handing out fully guaranteed contracts. He doesn't think that's a good thing for the National Football League. Chris Ballard saying we'll investigate everything if our quarterback is not sitting there at 4th overall. What do you do here if you're the Indianapolis Colts?
Okay, this is an easy one. Okay, I know. You trade the 4 to the 3 with Arizona, okay? And you give up a couple of thirds, this year's third, next year's third. Why do you do that? Because you need to guarantee yourself Richardson or Levis. Need to guarantee it. Because you know that Stroud and Bryce Young are going to go 1 and 2. Arizona is getting in your way. Because Arizona doesn't need a quarterback.
No.
They could go down to any other pick. That pick is for sale. If that happens, let's say a team comes up and now takes Anthony Richardson, which was your backup plan, Indianapolis, and you don't like Will Levis. Now you're in big trouble. So you can't let that happen. If you don't do that, then you have to look at Lamar Jackson. Why? Because look, is Lamar Jackson worth $250 million guaranteed? No. But would I give him 200 guaranteed? Maybe. I think he's worth more than what the Ravens offered him, but he's not worth what Deshaun Watson got. I don't think anybody's worth what Deshaun Watson's got, mind you. I mean, I think that was an egregious contract. And look at what Deshaun Watson looked like when he played.
Well, the contract reeked of desperation. Yeah, and Watson looked awful.
Terrible.
I mean, he
Awful.
looked terrible. I mean, Russ doesn't even do it service when you watch Deshaun Watson playing football. He looked absolutely terrible for the Browns. But here's the issue. Like, the Browns set this precedent in the National Football League that every other team now, because they reek of desperation, because they've got one of the worst owners in the National Football League. They're extremely poorly run. They were desperate for quarterback. They couldn't wait to get away from Baker Mayfield. And now they give Watson the deal that he, with all the baggage, think about that. Like, you gave a guy with all the baggage of Deshaun Watson, and no one's denying it. Doc, you and I, when he was at his peak with the Houston Texans, he was a top 5 quarterback in the league. No one's knocking the talent of Watson, but why was he the guy that was going to get the fully guaranteed contract? And then you also structure the contract to where you're not paying him all that much in year one when he's facing that suspension, and it's backloaded as well.
The owners, when they make a bad deal, do you ever notice that they go the other way and now they won't make any deal and everybody suffers? Well, look, how about the Minnesota Timberwolves trading that for Rudy Gobert? What a nightmare. Brian Geltzeiler will tell you that was a horrible deal. But
Your
now
buddy, my buddy, I love Geltz. He's going to join us later in the show.
Right. And everybody's going to compare. Right. Well, if the T-Wolves gave up this for Gobert, I want this too. Well, now what do teams have to do? I'm not doing that. Right. I'm not giving you that. And that's what's happening here in many ways. Lamar Jackson is not going to get the Deshaun Watson deal. He's not worth the Deshaun Watson deal. Neither of these guys are worth that deal, but he is worth a deal.
Yes. I mean, he is worth a deal, and he's worth more guaranteed money than Kyler Murray.
For sure. Murray, what has Kyler Murray done to be so impressive?
Well, nothing. I agree with you. And the lack of commitment and the stories coming out of Arizona, and, a former teammate coming out last year or after last season, unnamed, obviously, saying that they've created a monster in Arizona with Kyler Murray. Yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, the Arizona Cardinals would give anything to get rid of Kyler Murray. Like, if you offered him, nobody would take him, because of perceived attitude or lack of commitment when you look at Murray. Listen, for Lamar here, it's interesting because you get into the conversation. Well, he doesn't have an agent. He's going on social media. He's telling everybody and telling the Ravens, he requests a deal on March 2nd. Baltimore and John Harbaugh, they're meeting with the media, at the NFL owners meetings. And, he's getting asked like 25, 26 questions just specifically about Lamar Jackson. I think everyone tells me, while the relationship, where there are a lot of people that say, he can't go back. The relationship is broke. Not if they pay him. I mean, because if he gets the contract he's looking for, Lamar Jackson would be happy to be a Baltimore Raven.
But look at what's happening with the Ravens. Look at how many guys want to leave there. There's something that's happening in this culture there, Moose, that they're losing a lot of their good players. But I want to talk about one other thing. Didn't it feel like last year was the first time in a while that people questioned teammates' commitments? They questioned a Steelers receiver had issues. And then Chase Claypool got traded. Right? Arizona's been talking about Kyler Murray not wanting to study properly. People are now speaking up about stuff like this, and they don't want to be around guys like this. So I feel like that's going to change itself over time. But getting back to the other point, I'm worried about the Ravens culture there. If Lamar was your guy, why didn't you make an offer to him early enough? You let this go on long time. And let me ask you this, Moose. Are the Ravens winning a Super Bowl? No chance. They have no receiver. You go get Nelson Aguilar, who's a number 5 on the Patriots, and now you make him your number 2 on the Ravens? You're not telling me you want to win a Super Bowl.
Well, right. I agree with you. No doubt about it. We'll continue that conversation. Brian Geltzeiler. How long have you known Geltz?
I was in a fantasy football league with Geltz many years ago, probably starting in 1992.
So you've known him since 92?
Since 92. We were only 3 years old then. So, I mean.
I try that. Yeah, me as well. I was only 3 too. Paul Sporer is going to join the program for Fangraphs. We're going to chat with Paul. He's going to join us next. He's Doc Roto. I'm Mark Malusis. The show is Moose and Keith on a Thursday right here. Rolling till noon. Bettor Sports Network.
Talk sports with Lisa Ann and Rick Kamla Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Bettor Sports Network.
Let me say something about Tiger. Tiger has had to redesign his entire swing. Tiger has a difference in the length of his legs because of that horrible accident. In golf, there's no hey, you can't walk the greens. you have to take a cart. So I assumed by day 3 on Sunday, the inflammation would start. He took a couple breaks where they take care of his back a little bit, but it is fascinating watching him. And so it gave me this thought, like, is he that skilled at golf? Or is this a mental thing of dedication and determination? He is so dedicated to the sport that no matter what, he's relentless to it. And the dedication and determination goes to the golf, the swing, the playing, the walking, but it goes to his overall health. The average person who doesn't stay in great shape, gets in an accident like that, goes through multiple surgeries, is not recovering and going out there to walk. And that course has some pretty steep inclines, a lot of walking. I mean, how else can you factor these athletes, the Michael Jordans, the LeBrons, these players that just, their whole focus is really optimal health, optimal body skills, optimal. And then what comes next is being the best at what they do.
I think you just hit on why Tiger still has that drive. I don't know this. I don't know the man. It could just be love of the game. It could be, I want to make as much money as I can while playing. Could be all this stuff. But LA, a lot of people think Tiger Woods is the GOAT of golf. And I don't understand how you can be the GOAT of golf when you are 3 majors short of Jack Nicklaus. Okay. So like LeBron, I don't think he cares what guys like me say anymore, right? He's past Kareem. He thinks he's the GOAT. I mean, he's 3rd on my list. He's in the debate. Many other people think he's the GOAT. He's not my GOAT. You know what I mean? So I wonder if Tiger is there, like LeBron, like, I don't care what the pundits, what the barbershops say. I'm the GOAT. I don't have to do anything more. This is all gravy. I wonder if Tiger looks at it that way.
I don't know what Tiger's mindset is in the GOAT status, but when players talk about what it's like to be at a tournament, when Tiger's playing versus when he's not, they'll tell you that they're on the greens and they can hear the roar 4 holes over, and that there is nothing that compares to the excitement of when he's present.
Bettor Sports Live, Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 Pacific, exclusively on Bettor Sports Network. Or listen whenever you want on the app with BSN On Demand. It's Moose and Keith with Mark Malusis and Keith Irizarry.
Kicking off the 11 o'clock hour, doing in style. He's Doc Roto. I'm Mark Malusis. Paul Sporer joins us now. Oh, I love the mustache. Fangraphs joins us now. Paul, good morning. How are you?
Morning. I'm well. Thanks for having me on.
You got it. Have you always been sporting that mustache? It's impressive.
No, it's relatively new. It's kind of a sad reason why I got it. I don't want to bring the show down, but when my dad died, I grew it out. So I've been rocking it since then.
It looks awesome. I got to be
Thank
honest
you. I
with you.
appreciate
It looks fantastic.
It started off rough. I had to kind of give it some time to get in there, and now I like it, and the girlfriend co-signs, and that helps.
Well, no doubt about it. Doc and I kicked off the program, talk a little baseball, and how excited we are to see the changes in the sport this year, Paul. From your perspective, for the baseball fan, it's going to take a little while. Maybe you weren't paying attention to each and every spring training game. I don't fault you because sometimes it can be a little bit boring watching a little spring training baseball. But now in the regular season, how do you think it plays out here? Like, what do you think for baseball bringing about these rule changes? Where do you think the bars of success are? What do you think they're looking at internally to judge if these rule changes are working or not?
Speed of game, I think, is really going to be there. And we're already starting to see it in spring that the game times were coming down, in line with what they wanted to do. So I think that they're already seeing it be like, okay, hey, this is working. And then we kind of got an interesting counter case right away with the WBC, which I loved, by the way. It was amazing. I enjoyed every bit of it. But those games didn't have the clock, and we were a lot of people in my community, that I run in Twitter and Discord and Twitch. They were like, "Oh my God, this is painful without the clock. Speed it up." Even though the games were great, we were enjoying it. You could already tell how much we wanted the clock back. So I think it's definitely there.
Yeah, Paul, we were talking about earlier, and I said I went to a lot of spring training games, and the crowd needs to be younger. Right, you're seeing an older crowd because the young kids they're playing esports. They're watching more NBA. Do you think that stolen bases and a pitch clock will be enough to make a difference this year?
Probably not a massive difference in 1 year. No, it's going to take time. They have to market the stars better. That's something that basketball has done so well. And I'm not trying to be lewd, but like the guys are basically naked out there too, right? They're wearing a tank top and shorts. You can see them, like they're recognizable. That said, that's not even a good excuse for baseball because you can see them too. They got hats on or helmets, but they're still visible. And football has helmets on it, and they're very visible. Like they are able to market their stars. So you can't even use that as an excuse. But I've heard baseball people, like people in the baseball universe, say that, well, it's like, oh, basketball is easier to market because you can see those guys so much. No, baseball just needs to do better marketing their stars. You mentioned the esports thing, right? Such a great way for kids to connect with those players, with those esports players. They're in their streams. They can talk to them directly. I'm not saying that baseball can do the same, right? I mean, there's some guys that stream on Twitch or that do different things on social media, but it'll never be that one-to-one. But it's connecting with the players that is going to make the biggest difference. But if you get the pace up, you get more action in, I do think you can start to get more kids involved with watching baseball. Because right now, listen, I'm a diehard. They've got me. I'm not going anywhere. I adore the sport, but I can freely acknowledge that it can get boring. And when a 3-2 game should never take 3.5, 4 hours. That's disgusting. That's just entirely too long. I can do a 4-hour game if it's 10-7, the pace is cooking, and the only thing that's really slowing it down is sometimes they got to make a few pitching changes because a few guys are getting their clocks cleaned there on the mound. That's okay because you're making a change for a good reason there. But when it's just dragging, it's absolutely brutal, and the pace needed to be fixed. I think the clock does that right away, and we'll see if the ball gets in play more with the clock as well because pitchers won't be as well rested throughout the game. They have to go quicker. And then with the stolen bases, that is an action play. And so there's 3 different rules that will help encourage steals, and I hope some guys take advantage of it.
Paul, the other thing is, and I get into fights with people like the 3 certain outcomes or process over results, and I was joking around with Doc earlier on in the show. I like action. Like I like at batting average. I know people in terms of like it's an old school way of looking at a player and we're looking at OPS and there's other ways of graining out the impact. But I actually like when there are guys on base. Like I like when the fact that, you barrel up a baseball and, you hit a line drive that you were rewarded for that, not based on because, you got the better of the pitcher and you're not robbed of a hit because of a defensive alignment. So I'm really in favor of the fact that you're going to hopefully see the batting averages across Major League Baseball precipitously rise this year with the elimination of the shift.
I certainly hope so, right? Because it's not fully gone. There are just limitations. So some teams will get creative and they might move an outfielder over or whatever. But I definitely think that a lot of those pull hitting lefties are going to get more base hits, and that we just need to see the ball in play more. And I don't really have a problem with batting average. My only issue with batting average, as far as like the statistical revolution and the pushback there, is using it as a singular judge of a player.
First off,
there's really no stat that's good at that. Not even the advanced ones. Don't just give me a guy's WAR and tell me nothing else either. I like advanced stats, but we need to stop trying to find a wholesale one size fits all stat. Batting average was never that. OPS isn't that. WAR isn't that. We've got them all, so let's just use them, right? Like, give me his strikeouts, his walks, his OPS, his WRC plus, like whatever acronym you got. Give it all to me. I'll assess the player. But I don't mind batting average, and I want to see batting averages go up too. I agree because there's not enough hits in play. It's become what's called a 3 true outcomes game: walks, strikeouts, and homers. And there's entirely too many strikeouts. And you can't tell guys to throw slower, right? Like velo's through the roof. What are you going to say? You can't throw that fast. You can't have a speed limit. That would be stupid. But this pitch clock is a way to kind of almost institute a speed limit. Because like I was mentioning earlier, guys won't be as well rested throughout the game because when you take time between pitches, you kind of regenerate yourself. So the quickened pace should lower some of the velo. And I think we're going to see it especially late in games with relievers. Some of these relievers take like 45 seconds in between pitches, which is unreal to think about, especially because baseball doesn't live off the replay the way football does. Football's pace actually kind of sucks too. If you go to a football game, it's kind of a bad pace. But when you're watching it, you're seeing 7 different replays of each play that you don't really think about the time in between plays. So baseball doesn't have that. You don't need to replay a pitch 6 times, even a close pitch that may or may not have been a strike. You look at it once, the one over the regular replay and then the overhead one of home plate. And that's really it. So you got guys like Pedro Baez taking over a minute and a half, or taking about 3/4 of a minute, I should say. You got Kenley Jansen, Giovanni Gallegos, Devin Williams taking half a minute, 40 seconds. It's entirely too long. I can't wait to see what it does. I think we're going to see a lot more lead changes because of it too.
It's funny you mentioned that because I remember the days of Greg Maddux, right? Greg Maddux and
Mhm.
Tommy Glavine throwing 91 to 93. The game moved, and it was a beautiful thing to
Mark
watch.
Burley.
So, yeah, exactly. So let me pivot to in-season stuff. I know you're in tout. I am too. We're in labor, other great leagues. People had free agency fab already.
Yes.
Last night it ran. Man, there was a lot of money being spent on
Mhm.
guys. David Robertson, Derek Hall, Montero went for $83. Did you feel that people spend money too early in fab and people need to hold it back a little bit? Or do you think the time to strike is now early in the season to take advantage of guys who may get a lot more playing time?
I'm down to strike now because you're potentially getting a full season player, right? It always depends on what kind of budget you got and if your league allows $0 bids. Because if you're going to put in a big bid, think about the leagues that drafted like really early. Before Volpe was even really considered to be on the team, he wasn't getting drafted. So Anthony Volpe was a free agent in a lot of leagues, not because those leagues are stupid, but because they drafted in like early mid-February when he was never really going to be considered. So you're thinking like, oh, should I spend like 70% of my budget for a guy who could be a power speed shortstop on a really good team? Sure, perhaps, but if your league doesn't allow $0 bids and you have only got $100 for the year, that's when I would tap the brakes a little bit. $1,000 is a bit different, right? Because it's not just 10x everything with the $1,000. It is a completely different structure. You can do a lot of $1 bids, a lot of low dollar bids. So, if Volpe was available in like $1,000 budget plays, I could see going upwards of 775, 750 there, because you'd still have plenty of money to make the moves throughout the year. But if it's $100, I would be a bit more cautious there without $0 bids. I still wouldn't go too crazy even with $0 bids, but I understand why people are spending. Graham Ashcraft had a big spring. He's somebody who's going there. You mentioned Derek Hall filling in for Reese Hoskins. So I get why teams are going out there to fill in their big injury guys, because they're thinking and hoping that they can get somebody that they can use all year in this spot because of the guys who slipped through the cracks during the draft or emerged during spring.
Paul, do you think both Acuna Jr. with the Braves and Bichette with the Blue Jays have big years?
I think Acuna regains some of the power that we didn't see last year. It's interesting, right? We all thought, here, the one thing he's not going to do this year is run because he's coming off the ACL. Everything else should be same. No, the one thing he did well was run, and everything else was kind of off a little bit. I think he gets back to being an absolute monster. Bichette's a little bit of a tougher one for me because I was a little tepid on his running. I've kind of fallen for some guys who have run in the minors before, thinking that they were going to bring it up to the majors. Jock Peterson, George Springer are the first two that jumped to mind, and I was worried that Bichette was going to start being that guy. The way he looked in his first two partial seasons. Well, then he goes 25 for 26 on the bases, and I'm like, well, okay, he's a burner. He's going to kill it. Well, then he comes back last year and he goes 13 for 21. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. Now I don't really know what's going on because a lot of different things happen. There's a great article on Fangraphs that kind of covered all the different things that had changed in Bichette's game that cost his speed. So from a fantasy perspective, I still think he's going to be good because even if he only steals, like say another 13, if you're doing that with mid-20s homers, a great batting average, ton of runs and ribbies, that's fine. But is he going to be that bona fide first rounder, 20 plus on the homers and steals? I'm a little dubious on the steals again this year. I got to see a second year of the big steals.
I think Moose is asking that question because he brought up Bichette to me the other day. And I said that Bob Kramatola, a guy that we both know pretty well, who won the NFBC, said he was going to take him everywhere. And he took him at pick 4 in a lot of his drafts. So I said to him, if a guy like Bob is taking him, I need to be thinking, what is Bob thinking? Because he just won last year.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
That's where that all came from.
No, I think that makes sense. And there's a lot of very smart folks that are big on Bichette in that first round. Because again, I think even if he doesn't get all the way back to the 25 steals of 2021, Bichette can still be a fantasy. I mean, he was last year, right? He actually had to finish very strong to get there. But 290, 24, 13 steals, 93 ribbies, 91 runs. That's a first rounder. That's just a carbon copy of that will be fine. I do wonder, is he going to take advantage of the new rules, get his speed back up to where he's stealing 25? Because then that makes him like a number 1 overall potential type of guy.
Paul, want to ask you as far as individuals that you avoided in drafts this year. Like, are there players that you're concerned about, pitchers, hitters, whatever it might be, AL, NL, does not matter, that you think are setting up that you're kind of fading for lack of a better term, this
Yeah.
season in 2023.
Absolutely. Adolis Garcia is somebody I'm just not really bought in on. You talk about a power speed guy. I'm usually a big sucker for power speed guys. I just don't believe in the plate skills. And he pulled the trick again last year. You know, he had the breakout year in 2021. The market was actually really sharp on him, I thought. Like we didn't overpay as a fantasy community for Adolis Garcia, and he ended up being an amazing bargain. 27 homers, 25 steals as a late 100s, early 200s pick. Great. Okay, cool. Process versus results, though. He still had bad plate skills. I still worry that he's a guy who is not a particularly strong hitter. He's also, while he is new on the scene, Adolis Garcia is going to be 30 this year. So the defense is going to keep him in the lineup, even if he struggles a good bit. But I worry because now you're paying full price for him. He was a full fade for me. I was out on Adolis Garcia. Estuary Ruiz is somebody that could make me look stupid right away because I was out on him. I don't like the speed only guys, the guys that are just giving you steals that aren't particularly strong hitters. I've done that before too. You know, I used to take Billy Hamilton way too early, like an idiot, and fall for guys like that. But I've been out on that player type for a while now. Well, he went out and he had a brilliant spring. And usually I'm not going to give a ton of credence to spring, but there are certain aspects that I will care about. And if your strikeouts and walks are looking a lot different than your normal profile, that is something to pay attention to. It's been shown via data research that's a good indicator that things are actually changing with the guy. Same with their power. If their ISO, slugging minus batting average, is well higher than their established level, that can be an indicator that the power surge is coming. So all of those things were there for Estuary Ruiz. He had a huge spring. He had more walks than strikeouts. He had a little bit of pop going with it too. So I was like, okay, I might be wrong on this one. It's too late to make up for it and draft him anywhere because all my drafts are done. But I'm going to hold my fate. I'm not going to completely turn around and say, oh, based off of spring, I'm back in. I am still out on Estuary Ruiz. He's not in any of my leagues, but he can make me look dumb quickly based on his spring if he carries that over. And he did get the spot. They even kicked Christian Pache to the curb, which I thought was kind of weird for Oakland. Pache can't hit, right? Like we have not seen him hit, even though he did have a decent spring. There's no way he's not one of Oakland's 26 best players, but that's for another time. And then another one that I kind of already got right, quote unquote. And I'd never like to take any sort of like pride in an injury because that sucks. Plus, this guy's my big time body comp. Tristan McKenzie and I are both a couple of twigs. He is 6'5", 170, which is exactly what I am. So I root for him. He was actually a big breakout pick for me last year. But you know, when you're playing fantasy, it's all about price, right? You can love a guy 1 year. He works, he hits for you, and then you're out the very next year just because the price of poker went up. And that's exactly what happened with Tristan McKenzie. So, you know, I'm kind of double bragging here that I was in on him last year and I got the hit, and then I faded him this year, and now he's hurt for upwards of 2 months. But again, it's not to brag about him getting hurt or anything, but I did worry about that frame. That's been the issue with McKenzie is can that frame hold up to the rigors of 6 months a season? And we're seeing already that he might miss upwards of 2 months. And that's just the scary part. The talent, unquestioned. It's all about the health. And he had a ton of health issues coming in to his major league career. He stayed healthy last year, had a brilliant season, but I wasn't ready to pay the like top 25 starter price on McKenzie. And so again, we've already seen that now he's hurt, and we'll see what happens with him there when he comes back. But those were three guys, Estuary Ruiz, Adolis Garcia, Tristan McKenzie, that I was pretty firmly out on. And I have some concerns about Teoscar Hernandez going to Seattle and what that's going to do to his power. He's got big boy power, so he can hit anywhere, but I still worry that it's going to eat up a little bit of the power. Plus, he's had the health issues, and he doesn't have a great plate profile. That said, I'm a fan of the player, so I have the kind of the heart versus the head thing. My brain says fade. My heart says I hope he does really well, but I didn't take any Teoscar Hernandez, and I was pretty firmly out on him as well.
I have a bone to pick with you about Estuary Ruiz, by the way.
Let's hear it.
And I'm going to tell you why. His worst case scenario, 5 home runs, 30 stolen bases, right? That's Estuary if he's awful. Maybe he's hitting 240. Maybe they're taking him out a little bit. He's playing 4 or 5 games a week. He's not playing 7. But Paul, what if? What if he hits 12 home runs? What if he hits 6? What if he gets 60 stolen bases? What if he hits 270? But look at the difference. Crazy. But it's not a big difference, 5 to 12. And if he can hit, he stays in the lineup and steals. So here's my pick, my bone to pick with you. He's a winning pick. I may lose a league, but if he hits, I probably have a really good chance of winning my league.
Certainly.
Nobody ever remembers who came in second place in your league. I know I don't.
Well,
so he's the type of guy that
if it pays out. But yeah, exactly. Obviously you want to make sure you're still profitable, but Yeah, you're trying to win leagues. I totally get that. I just felt like the price was a bit too high on him too.
Round
Another
14.
rabbit who, pardon me.
I think he was going in rounds 13 to 15 in most of the leagues that I was in. Was he
That's
going earlier
that's
in
a
yours?
that's a pretty good pick. Like that's somebody that has to perform. And so, he certainly could. Again, 7 walks, 4 strikeouts in spring. That's like really, really great. When you can have more walks than strikeouts, that's huge. So, and 2 homers, 6 steals, everything was there in spring for Ruiz. If you bought in like you did, you've got to be feeling great coming off of those 46 plate appearances for him. The issue for me is a guy like that, though, on the low end that you're talking about, 4 or 5 homers, 30 steals, sure. But he's going to have like 9 RBIs and 20 runs on that garbage team. My only issue is that you have to
5 home runs and 9 RBIs is brutal,
yes.
right?
Yeah, it's gonna be wild. It's gonna be wild. 5 homers and 5 of his 9 ribbies are gonna be himself.
Right.
But you really have to plan to cover those categories, the extra power and the runs and ribbies, if he fails. So as long as you got enough power, if you got Pete Alonso pairing with him and a few other power guys, sure, you can take it. What I've noticed with people that take like the Miles Straws of the world, and I will say they're a bit different because Straw's never been believed that he could hit double-digit homers. And Ruiz, people do believe that he can. If he really takes the trajectory that his biggest proponents believe, there is double-digit power there for him, even if it's just flat 10. That would be great. Even 8 or 9 would be way more than Miles Straw ever did. So he's a different player type, but he's at least in that class. But you always have to be careful that if they hit their low end, do you have enough power and runs and ribbies to cover, because they're kind of a dead spot there. Even if they give you the 30 steals on the negative end of it, are you covering Estuary Ruiz's bad runs and ribbies, because he's on such a bad team too? It might not even be his fault in that case. But yeah, I see it. Again, the spring was huge and way better than I expected him to do. And maybe he's not just one of those pure rabbits that I kind of tabbed him as. And I'll be keeping tabs on him. If he goes and has a great season, I'll take my L. I wear my L's. If I'm going to brag about my wins, I'm going to wear my L's. I was huge on Akil Baddoo last year with my Tigers, and a total fall on your face type of guy. And now the team is just not bought in on him at all. So again, if I make a miss, I'm never going to run from it. You can always come hit me up on Twitter and say, oh, you were out on this guy. I'll eat it. I'm not worried about that, but make sure you give me my credit if I hit anything too.
Paul Sporer, writer, podcaster for Fangraphs. Paul, you're awesome. I want to ask you, it is opening day.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's got predictions when you're looking at World Series. Is there teams that you like? Like I like San Diego in the American League. It's hard to, I get a lot of love for Toronto, Seattle, obviously Houston. I grew up a Yankee fan. I still don't think they've made up for the difference between them and the Stros, but we'll see what happens. I'm excited to watch Volpe and see what he does wearing 11. You're starting shortstop. Who do you like to win the World Series? Who do you like coming out of the AL? Who do you like coming out of the NL?
So I'm a sucker. I'm a total sucker. I'm going for the Angels again. And part of it might be
Angels.
Yeah.
I said the Angels. They are a surprise team.
I think they had a great offseason. I think they had a fantastic offseason. Look, I've been rooting for them. I'm a Tigers fan, but I'm a partial Angels fan just to get Trout and Ohtani under the lights of October. Like I just desperately want that, right? So part of it is some wish casting, but I wouldn't just pick them if I didn't really think that there was a path. I truly believe that there is, though. I think that lineup has some depth to it. I liked the moves that they made there, getting Rengifo, Drury, and Urshela. 3 just solid players. None of them are superstars or anywhere close to it, but they're all solid, especially Urshela. He's kind of underrated, and I really think he could be nice for them. But I like what Drury did. This is another good park to hit in. San Diego was tough, and it hurt him, but he killed it in Cincy, and LA's a solid park to hit in. And Renfroe's just a power dude. Like he's going to hit 30 with, and play some good right field for them. But I like the staff. One of the bigger issues these recent years has been the pitching. It's been Ohtani, Sandoval, and a bunch of geeks. But they got Ohtani, Sandoval, Anderson, Detmers, Suarez. That's a solid 5 there. Now, the depth is a little light, that if things go awry or they lose some guys, we got to see what happens there. But I really do believe that this Angels team can make a run. I like Griffin Canning, actually. He's dealing with a strained groin right now. He could be a nice 6th for them. Tucker Davidson, I'm not as sold on him. He's kind of their 6th,
Rendon
7.
coming back, Paul. Rendon could have a big year.
And I've been a Rendon fan forever. It's all about health with him, right? It's not skill. Like this is somebody that if you can guarantee 140 games, even, give him that's 22 games he can miss. You give me 140, I'm getting a plus bat. Like I firmly believe that with Rendon. And that lineup, like I said, can run 1 to 9 pretty strong. I'm a huge Taylor Ward fan. Trout, Ohtani, Rendon, Renfroe, Renhefo is a solid little player at second base. Drury or Urshela, and then Logan O'Hoppe, the rookie catcher, is very interesting too. And they're committing to a rookie catcher, but I think he's really got the tools there. So the bullpen also has to kind of be built on the fly a little bit. Carlos Esteves was a good pickup that I liked. He started spring off horribly, absolutely monstrously bad, but closed very strong, looking like the guy I believe he can be. Flamethrower getting out of Colorado. If he gets his swings and misses there, I really like what he can do too. It's kind of a no-name bullpen behind him, but you don't have to have a bunch of names back there. As long as you're piecing it together, I think they've got some decent guys with Herget, Tepera, Loop. So I picked them. I picked the Angels to beat the Astros and go, and I got them to face the Mets. So I'm picking the two teams that that are easily teams that people like, but seem to be snake bitten in one way or the other.
Paul, you're awesome. I love the passion. You do a great job on Fangraphs, the podcast, writing, a passion about baseball, and it's never bad when you admit you're wrong. Like, I hate when people like go out there and they'll say something and then they're wrong, because I'm wrong all the time. And I don't mind admitting when
I tell my wife I'm never wrong, Moose.
My girlfriend tells me how wrong I am.
Yes, exactly. Well, I've been
Miss
married
Riddle,
15 years. I don't do anything right, amazingly enough, but I've made it through 15 years. Paul, enjoy opening day. Continued success. We got to get you on again real soon.
Sounds great. I appreciate y'all having me on. Take care.
You got it. Paul Sporer, Fangraphs, a writer, podcaster, just awesome. I mean, a wealth of knowledge. He really is.
Yeah, he's like an Energizer bunny. You could just wind him up and let him go, and it's all interesting and it's all accurate. And he is in the fantasy baseball space. He is an A-lister. Really, he's an A-lister.
Yeah, no, I enjoy his work. I'm not as big of a fantasy player as you are, Doc, but I enjoy his work. I love people that are passionate about what they do. Right. And are passionate, and you could sense that passion and are backing it up and doing the necessary work behind the scenes. And Paul was just a kind of a wealth of knowledge, and he's all in on the Angels. And you seem to be a guy that's an Angels guy this year as well.
I think that they can sneak in for that second wild card. I love Taylor Ward. Love this guy. I like O'Hoppe as well at catcher. Rendon was a guy who hit 340, Moose. This is a guy who hit 340, who all of a sudden had one bad year and are burying him. So all of a sudden you have Trout, you have Ward, you have Ohtani, you have Rendon, you've got Hunter Renfroe. There are things here that if it all hits and they stay healthy, and I know we can say that about every team, they are the team. Like, if you want a futures bet to go over, I like them as over and wins.
Well, and Doc we're going to talk a little NBA. Geltzeiler, buddy of yours and mine, is going to join us at the bottom of the hour. But I will say this, it'd be great for baseball on the whole. And I live on the East Coast. I live up in Connecticut. You live in Florida. But let's all be honest here. It would be great for Major League Baseball to get both Ohtani and Trout into October.
Can I tell you a true story?
Yeah.
I was an Angel fan for a time.
Were you?
Do you want to know why? I'll give you
Don
one
Baylor.
word. No,
Baylor.
but close.
Reggie
Jackson, baby.
Oh, Reggie Jackson.
When Reggie Jackson went to the Angels, I had to root for. I mean, I was the biggest Reggie Jackson fan ever, except for my dad. He loved him as much. And so I started to wear an Angels hat because I was like, I love Reggie.
Well, I love the color scheme, and the hat's great. The halo and everything like that. Yeah. Reggie Jackson was great there. I love Don Baylor was always the guy. He'd have the upright stance, and he'd always lean in to get hit by the pitch.
That dude must be tough. I wouldn't want to mess with him in a locker room.
Well, and he's not wearing the face guard. Yeah. He was just wearing the batter's cap that I used to be able to get like an ice cream with at the old Yankee Stadium.
He's like, come on, throw it at me, dude. Come on, yeah. I love those. Didn't you like to get your Carvel or something in your helmet?
Yes.
That's the best.
It is the best. There's nothing better than ice cream and a baseball cap. We'll come back. We'll talk a little NBA. Geltzeiler will join us. He's Doc Roto. I'm Mark Malusis. Good Thursday, one and all. It's Moose and Keith right here on the Bettor Sports Network.
Talk about your picks and your fantasy teams on Bettor Sports Network.
The importance of checking out the site that you're playing on. Default rankings of these sites. A lot of times they don't get updated. I know from experience. I used to write default rankings for the NFBKC, the basketball version of the NFBC. I'd write these default rankings in June for the NBA, before the NBA draft, before free agency opened up. And guess what? I was never asked to write an update article or update the default rankings. This happens a lot. Maybe if there's something obvious, it gets updated. Aaron Judge, for some reason, hurts his back. Maybe they make that change. Just maybe. But you don't know that. And that's why it's just so important that you show up to your draft room or you do that pre-draft prep. We're all busy. We know we're about to devote a lot of time to our fantasy baseball drafts. Why not spend the extra 20 to 25 minutes to invest properly in your team, to go and see which of those players are way down default rankings? They're going to be different on all of these sites, and you're going to be looking at them and going, maybe their analysts think a certain player who shouldn't be in the top 100, who should be maybe even not even the top 200, will be in that top 100. You got to check that out. You got to know where you're playing, just like you got to know your format when you sign up for the league. It's just so crucial, and people just skip right over it. You think it's cool to show up to the draft room 3 minutes before the draft. Well, number one, it's not cool because the commissioner's trying to make sure it is organized, especially me, who runs auctions. You can't, it's one thing if someone doesn't show up for the snake draft, oh well, doesn't ruin it for everyone. Auctions, you can't have someone not show up. Auto bidding, auto auctioning, it ruins the sanctity of those drafts here, which is why I always recommend, hey, make it easy on your commissioner. Don't make them send those texts there. It's annoying. You shouldn't have to do that. Don't wait till the last minute and get in there about 20, 25 minutes before so you can just look up and down the entire default rankings list so you can make a queue out of that, Ron. And the reason I keep saying this is because people still show up 2-3 minutes before the draft, and that's it. In fact, in one of my auctions, people were asking me where certain players were, and I go, did you search their name? No, I just got in. Well, that's no excuse right there. That's your own fault. I mean, you're organized, so you're a hard person to ask here.
You're getting those questions. This is your preschool league, right? People don't know how to search player names.
People freak out. They don't think. That's the problem. Because they show up 2 minutes before the draft. That's why.
The Playbook with Fensty and Ronis, presented by FantasyAlarm.com. Weekdays at 5 Eastern on Bettor Sports Network. However you're invested in sports, from betting to fantasy, collectibles, and more, join our community on Bettor Sports Network.
They often say it's a small world. It really is, because I had no idea when Brian Geltzeiler was booked for this show that he and Doc Roto have been playing fantasy sports together since the 90s.
We are, and he got the same memo with the same colored shirt to wear. I didn't
That's
even know
it.
that.
I mean, I had no idea. Doc brought it up right before the show. I've known Geltz for a long time. Look at that small world. I had
Small
no
world,
idea.
man. It really is. This is how we connect. It's awesome. Listen, Mark's been kicking my butt in fantasy sports for over 20 years. The guy's really good. And when I'm in leagues that I'm not in leagues with him anymore, but when I need advice, that's my first text. Who am I starting on my fantasy team? And it's Dr. Roto's my guy. So it's great to be with both of you guys. This is actually, considering how long I go back with each of you in separate parts of my life, this is really a major, major honor and a privilege to be with the two of you together.
By the way, Moose, I have to congratulate Brian's son because he asked me who I would start. And I said I would start a certain guy. I can't remember. I knew it was Daniel Jones or this other guy. And I said, try the other guy. And then then Jones played so well. And I apologized to you. I said, I gave you the wrong guy. And Brian texted me back. He goes, my son says you start the guy who brought you there. We started Jones and we won. I was so happy because
Yes.
I thought I let him down big time and we did.
There you go.
My 13-year-old looked me in the eye and goes, we danced with the one that brought us. How do you argue with the logic, right? Let's do it. So we won the playoff game. Yep.
You can't argue with that. Geltz, we're winding down here in the NBA season. Let's obviously there's a lot of storylines in the association. Let's start in the Eastern Conference. What's going on with the Boston Celtics right now?
Well, they played a little better lately. I know they got beat up by the Wizards the other night. You know, Joe Mazzulla is still learning the job. Now, guys, think about that. This is a team that went to Game 6 of the NBA Finals last year. This is a team that you could have made as an odds-on title favorite coming into the season. They're that good. They're that deep. They're that talented. Brad Stevens and Mike Zarin went out in the offseason and they improved the roster. They brought in a guy that is got a real good chance to win Sixth Man of the Year, Malcolm Brogdon, and the team has been terrific. You hired a 34-year-old coach that's never been a coach at any time before. And there have been times, and I will tell you guys, there's buzz behind the scenes around the league to this exact extent. I've spoken to people within organizations and in high-level media positions who scratch their head tactically at things Missoula does, the lack of calling timeouts. I mean, Marcus Smart's been playing hurt for a while now. Derek White's been tremendous. He won't close games with Derek White on the floor. The White-Brogdon backcourt and playing small has been something that Boston can derive a major advantage both against Milwaukee and Philadelphia with. It took Missoula forever to go with it. And even times now he doesn't go with it. It's Joe Missoula is the thing that you worry about the most with the Celtics because you get in it. First of all, he'll never outcoach Mike Budenholzer because Budenholzer's been there many a time. He's seen it in San Antonio. He's won a title with Milwaukee. I know we like to bag on Doc Rivers as being the deer in the headlights in the playoffs, but Doc knows what he's doing, and he's got Dave Yeager and Sam Cassell sitting next to him. And by the way, Missoula's lead assistant, the guy that gave him the most advice about everything, David Stoudemire, left to go take a college job. He doesn't have much on that bench with him. I really, really worry about what happens when it comes to Missoula making the kind of adjustments and decisions he has to make with this group when it comes playoff time.
Geltz, I want to move to the Western Conference here for a second. The Mavericks go and they bring in Kyrie, which I've never been a fan of. I know he's a great player, but scorched earth is the only words I have for Kyrie. You've traded Dinwiddie, you traded Finney Smith, you traded draft picks. Can they even make the playoffs? Can they make a playoff run? And they're going to lose Kyrie for nothing in the offseason.
No. I mean, listen, they'll make the playoffs, though. I think they'll make the play-in, I should say. I don't know that they get out of the play-in. This is, keep one thing in mind. They were 22nd in the league in defensive efficiency when they made the Irving trade, and they traded their best perimeter defender. And we know this, guys, and this is the same for any sport. When you're operating out of desperation, you're going to make mistakes. And the Dallas Mavericks now 2 trade deadlines in a row are operating out of desperation. Here's the net. I want you to think about this, guys. The net of what they've moved to what they got. They essentially traded Kristaps Porzingis, who, by the way, the Wizards are about to extend, has been their best player this year and has had an excellent season. They traded Kristaps Porzingis. They traded Dorian Finney-Smith, legit 3D guy and their best perimeter defender, and a first-round pick for a Kyrie Irving rental and for the pleasure of having to pay Davis Bertans. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me with this front office? Think about that for a minute. Porzingis, who's played so well, they're going to extend him. Finney Smith and a first for a Kyrie rental and paying Davis Bertans' bad contract. It's unbelievable how this front office has fumbled this entire situation. I know Jason Kidd may lose his job over this. They've given him a very tough hand to play here. It's all based upon the fact that they're chasing their tail trying to keep Luka happy. At a certain point in time, build the right kind of team around Luka. You have him under contract for a long time. You build the right kind of team around Luka, he's not going to ask out. And I'll leave you with this, Mark, because I think it's a very interesting question that you ask. Luka Doncic may be the kind of star that just for the next 3 to 5 years is not going to play well with another star. You may have to do the kind of the Dirk build that they did when they won in 11. Get the right guy playing the 5, the right 3D guys around him, the right playmaker to help him. Listen, they had a perfect player. I just went through that whole personnel thing. They had a perfect player next to Luka, who Luka loved playing with, who knew how to play next to Luka in Jalen Brunson, and they wouldn't pay the guy for $55 million for 4 years. Think about that. Okay, it's unbelievable how the Mavericks took a great situation and just completely fumbled it in a year and change.
With the Lakers and the return of LeBron, are they a threat if LeBron and Davis stay healthy in the West?
I got to tell you, they look good in Chicago last night, guys. They really did. And if LeBron started last night, Reeves has played very well for them. If you're going to keep everybody on the court, they're tough in the West. Now, can they beat everybody? Probably not. I don't think they can. But can they beat anybody? They can beat anybody. They've all of a sudden got some depth going there. You have a bench with Schroeder and Beasley coming off of it, which looks good. Having LeBron in your lineup still, at his age allows you a versatility where you can bring guards in off the bench and smaller players and play a little smaller, and he'll play a little bigger for you. So that's something that they've done, and they've done a nice job with. The Lakers, if they can stay fully healthy. But listen, how many if they can stay fully healthy teams do we have in the West, right? I mean, the Warriors are right up there with their health, the Clippers, the Suns, but the Lakers do go in that group right now. With LeBron back, if he's going to play at a high level here and he's truly healthy, if you can keep Anthony Davis on the floor, they get tough in the playoffs here. And give them credit. Look at where this team is right now at 500. Started the season 2-10. And they've had Davis out of the lineup for big chunks of time, LeBron James out of the lineup for big chunks of time. And as much heat as Darvin Ham has taken, as much as we piled on Rob Pelinka for some of the things that he's done, Pelinka made some major decisions, gutsy decisions at the trade deadline that have benefited this team. And Darvin Ham's done a damn good job keeping these guys playing hard.
Will we ever see Damian Lillard play for the Trailblazers again?
I don't think so. What I heard recently this week is that he'll never ask out, but he does want them to do right by him, which is essentially a very passive aggressive form of him asking out. I think he's had enough. I think it's at a point for him where, as much as there's this pride in being with one organization for your entire career, I don't know that they have the wherewithal to build it. I mean, think about where they are right now, guys. Lillard's had the best statistical year of his career. Jeremy Grant's had the best year of his career. Anthony Simons has burst onto the scene and played terrific this year. They still stink. They still stink. And so if you're Lillard, even if you're the Blazers, point, could his value be any higher? Like, we're not going to be really good. If we make every right decision, we're not going to be really good for 3 years. In 3 years, even if we're not really good and we go to trade him, is he going to have the same amount of value he has now? There is no way. And the thing is, you look around the league with teams that are kind of set at the point guard position, there's not a plethora of bidders out there for Damian Lillard. It's, the Knicks would have been a team that I know a lot of people logically thought, hey, the Knicks are a great fit for Lillard. At Lillard at 32, Brunson at 26. I'll take Jalen Brunson right now with what the Knicks are building and find a different star to input into that situation. I mean, I know the Sixers have always been sweet on Lillard, and we don't know what's going to happen with Harden, but do they have the assets to be able to bring him in? I know Atlanta probably does, and they could certainly make some kind of big trade. My point is, you start to look around the league at a lot of teams about who has assets and who doesn't, and who would have the need for Lillard and who doesn't, and the market gets pretty limited. If I'm the Blazers, because it's what's best for my organization in the long term, I probably do, trade request or not, I probably move him this offseason.
Stay in the West. Denver, Memphis, Sacramento. Which team you buying? Which team you fading?
I'm buying Denver. I picked them to win the West at the beginning of the season. They've shown me no reason why I shouldn't go with them. They had a little rough stretch 2 weeks ago. They've recovered pretty quickly. I think there are some weaknesses inside defensively. But with guys like Caldwell Pope and Bruce Brown and Aaron Gordon are good playoff players because they guard. So I think and by the way, they're as well coached as any team in the league. So Denver is my clear buyer there. The fade question is hard because. So if a Steven Adams is not going to come back, I probably fade Memphis. I just think there's a lot of things that are coming apart in Memphis. They're not defending like they once were. They were one of the best offensive rebounding teams in the league with Steven Adams. That's not there anymore. Adams was the adult in the room for a group that desperately needs an adult in the room. And although Morant is a brilliant talent, anytime he's out on the floor, they're a big threat. I worry about this team being able to keep it together in a playoff situation. I know Sacramento is a poor defensive team. I get that. But they're together and they play hard and they're well coached and they've stayed healthy all year with a good group. And you got guys that are growing right before our eyes. Just Kevin Huerter has played absolutely fantastic this year for them and made an enormous impact. So I would probably say the Sacramento somewhere in the middle, buying Denver, fading Memphis.
Kelts, earlier in the show, Moose and I were talking about owners making bad deals like Jimmy Haslam with Deshaun Watson, and now Lamar Jackson's paying for that bad deal, right? Because nobody wants to give him that deal because it was a horrible one.
Right.
The Rudy Gobert trade was horrendous. I mean, maybe one of the worst we've ever seen. Are teams going to reject those type of big deals? Or is the expectation now, if the Timberwolves gave up that for Gobert, we want that?
Well, the expectation is we want that. The problem is it's actually become an outlier because if it's the peak of the market and the market is peaked and now the market's coming back a little bit. Now, how much does the market, come down? Probably not that much, but it will come down some. Because if you look at what Danny Ainge and the Utah Jazz got for Donovan Mitchell, it was actually less than what they got for Gobert. And I don't think you could speak to anybody who covers the NBA objectively that will tell you that Rudy Gobert is a better player than Donovan Mitchell. It's just not. And so the market already came down a little bit. The Durant trade, it was for Kevin Durant. And you had a unique circumstance where you had a brand new owner take over with the opportunity to get Kevin Durant. And he turns around and says, put Bridges and Crowder in the deal and get me Kevin Durant. And so they were able to do that. But I do think, to your point, part of what you're seeing in the NFL right now with Lamar Jackson is that the Watson deal, these NFL owners very badly want the Watson deal to be an outlier. And they're going to treat it as an outlier so they don't necessarily have to guarantee this amount of money to every franchise quarterback that comes on the market for the next 5 years. So there's a systemic thing. And does it sound like collusion? Yes, it probably is. But there's a systemic thing that's working in the situation in the NFL in trying to align against this kind of deal being signed again. I think in the NBA trade market, it's somewhat similar. You can go ask for the world for your star right now, but you're not going to get it. And in the end, if you're shopping your star, it means you're trading your star. So there's only so much leverage that you're going to have. And then when you look at what actually is offered, who cares that it's less than Gobert? If it's something that can be a launching pad for the right kind of rebuild for your organization, you do it. My point is that assuming Lillard goes this summer, he will go for less than what Gobert went for. There's no doubt about it. Listen, you could look at the year Walker Kessler's had for Utah. I'm not sure, based upon age, I would trade Walker Kessler straight up for Rudy Gobert right now. Forget about all the picks and the other players that went. Okay, but that's how well he's played. So I think when we see a Lillard trade, it won't be as much as Durant either. It's going to be more in line with what the Donovan Mitchell deal was. I think that's the market that we need to look at going forward.
All right, Suns, Warriors. Which one of those two teams do you think has a better shot of getting through the West and getting to the NBA Finals?
Clearly the Suns. And I say it.
There's a lot of people out there like, come playoff time, I'm playing Golden State. I'm betting Golden State. Golden State defending NBA champs. I mean, but up until late, they've been atrocious on the road.
Terrible. And how do you come? And here's the first question. How are you that bad on the road? And then you come from the back end of the Western Conference seeding and have to win road games against teams that have had better records than you all year. How do you do it? I mean, listen, look at the Warriors' road record. They're right there with the Pistons, okay? And, the worst of the worst, the Charlotte Hornets, okay? They're right there with all the worst teams in the league with their road record. It's terrible.
And it's not Brian, I don't mean to interrupt you, but it's not a good look either when Klay Thompson is on the bench holding up how many rings he's won when they're getting.
Well, yes, 100% right.
I mean, what do you? Yeah.
And very few things Draymond does are a good look. Like Draymond the other night had to be talked to by Bob Myers. He had to be taken out of the game by Steve Kerr. The refs gave him a gift, not ejected him, which would have cost him a game and a half because he would have been suspended again. There's messy stuff going on there. But here's the thing about the Warriors that everybody is missing. Without Wiggins, you are nowhere. You can't guard the best perimeter player on another team. How are you guarding? Listen, no one really guards Kevin Durant well, but you want to make him work hard. Who's making him work hard on that team that's not Andrew Wiggins? Clay's not doing it, right? And find me any perimeter player in the league who's going to do it with LeBron. Who's going to make LeBron work hard? Wiggins is your only guy that can. Who's going to make Jamal Murray or Michael Porter work hard? Who's going to make De'Aaron Fox work hard? No one but Andrew Wiggins. Without Wiggins, they're nowhere. The bizarre thing about this organization, and I personally think at the time, I know everybody talks about what happened with Green and Poole as being an inflection point for this organization. The inflection point came before that. The inflection point came in the offseason where a lot of the NBA finals, they couldn't play Jordan Poole because he was so bad defensively. And Andrew Wiggins was their second best player in the finals behind Curry and was their best defensive player. And contract times comes and Poole gets 4 years at $35 million a year and Wiggins signs a 4-year extension at $28 million a year. Playable at times in the finals, but the guy that put up the numbers got more money. So Poole's arrogance led to Draymond punching him in the face. All right. That was part of where Poole's arrogance came from, was the money. They've totally screwed this up in Golden State. Could they beat anybody in a playoff series? There's no doubt they can. They're that talented. Can they beat everybody? I put them in the category with the Lakers. I really do. They can beat anybody. They can't beat everybody.
Kel, it's the last question for me here. I always think the NBA is better when the Knicks are good, when Madison Square Garden's hopping. right? It's just a better league. What do the Knicks need to make a run this year? Can they do it? Or if they can't, what do they need to pick up next year to get to where they want to be?
Well, all right. So first things first, I was in the Garden last night for the Knicks Heat game, and the Garden was buzzing last night. Great scene in the Garden last night. But Julius Randle sprained an ankle that didn't look good. So the first thing we need to find out is how long is he out? When's he coming back? What are MRI results? And because without Julius Randle, you're not getting out of the first round. Maybe you may not get out of the first round with Julius Randle. Listen, I think for the Knicks here, because of what last year was, entry into the playoffs, taking the Cavs deep in the first round would be a successful season for them. And I think to advance, they're going to need RJ Barrett and Quentin Grimes, but especially Barrett, to be better than they've been all year. And I don't know if that's realistic to expect with these two young players. Barrett has been very good lately, and it's certainly helped them with the absence of Brunson. But I just don't see him improving enough for them to truly make an impact here in the playoffs. As far as trades go, listen, they're in as good shape as anybody in terms of trading for the next disgruntled star player. The problem for them is that the two guys may be Lillard and Towns. And Lillard, they don't need with Jalen Brunson. And I, as I said earlier, I wouldn't do that. When it comes to Towns, does Towns fit better next to Randall, or does Mitchell Robinson to Randall? That's a legitimate question you're going to have to ask, because you're going to have to take wing talent off your team to send to Minnesota to get Karl Anthony Towns. Now, listen, there's other guys that may surprise us and come available. The one name you're hearing a lot of buzz with is Jaylen Brown, who may want his own team. If Jaylen Brown comes available, that's the Knicks push all my chips to the middle of the table move. Pretty much take everything that you want from my team, not name Brunson or Randall. Not name Brunson or Randall, and I'll build the whole thing around those three players. Because that would be the kind of guy that you put on the Knicks, and he would be absolutely perfect. Here's my point. One of these, just a major upgrade with a long scoring wing that defends, who you can have be a ball handler and pick and roll. And there's only a handful of them in the league. There's not many of them in the league. And even a guy like Zach LaVine is not going to guard good enough to please Tom. So I don't know that even he's right if he comes available. And listen, with the Bulls playing as well as they have since the trade deadline, I don't know that he's going to come available. So to me, the ideal guy is Jaylen Brown if he's available, and if he is available, the Knicks have to go all in for him.
Is quickly, Geltz, is it Brown and Tatum? Is that why their relationship? Is that why he's not happy up in Boston?
I think there's a couple things here. Number one, he makes a lot less than Tatum.
Yes.
And if they're not, and this has been a team that has been careful with how much luxury tax they're willing to pay. And Brown is, likely to end up as an all-NBA selection, at least I think this year. And a max deal is going to be a juiced max deal because he's going to have an all-NBA in his hip pocket. So he's expecting them to pay him and pay him big. And if they balk at all, he may look to the exit. And his relationship with Tatum is fine. But I think for Jaylen Brown, a lot of this is about a struggle to be respected as an all-NBA type of player within the organization that I play for. And I liken some of it to how disgruntled Kevin Durant got in Golden State. Because Kevin Durant was the best player in the NBA, won 2 consecutive finals MVPs, yet there was nothing he could do to be the most important player on his team. And that became very frustrating, and he felt, I should say, very unappreciated. I think for Jaylen Brown, it's a similar situation. I think he feels like he's just as good as Tatum, and you can make a case when you look at what he's done this year that he is. Certainly second half of the season, he's been their best player, better than Tatum. And I think he doesn't think he's respected to that extent by the guys that run the show there. So this coming up off season, going into the last year of his contract, is a crucial off season. If they telegraph to him that they're willing to step up financially for him, I think you don't have an issue with Brown. I think if they hesitate even in the slightest bit, Jaylen at this point is sensitive enough to this stuff. And I'm not blaming him, rightfully so, because he's a fantastic player. He's a better defensive player than Tatum. And in some ways, at times, he can be as good offensively. Maybe not a better offensive player. Tatum's a special offensive player, but he's damn close. When you look at that with Jaylen Brown, it's going to want to be appreciated and paid and treated that way. If he feels like he's, it's not 1A and 1B, but it's 1 and 2, and I'm the 2, I don't want to be a 2. I'm too good for that. And I think that could be the type of thing that has him say, you know what, I won't re-sign here. You should trade me.
Brian Geltzeiler, Sirius XM NBA Radio. What was the year you beat Doc Roto in fantasy? I'm just curious.
I don't think there was a year that I beat Doc Roto in fantasy.
Doc Roto was undefeated. You never.
No, I wouldn't go that far.
No, I wouldn't go that far. But I did. It's funny. I have won that league 3 times, and all 3 times I've won that league was after Doc Roto left. Okay, so Mark's exit was my benefit. So that's the one thing I have to say.
Well, Geltz, we love you. Appreciate it. Enjoy opening day
sir.
today in baseball, and we'll continue continued success. All right.
All right, you guys. Same to you guys. Love you both. Talk to you both soon. Always my pleasure.
Brian Geltzeiler, Sirius XM NBA Radio. He's great.
Can I give props to Ernie?
Yeah.
For bringing in 3 stellar guests today.
They were all awesome.
Awesome. Ernie, you killed it today, my man. I mean, seriously, the NFL draft stuff was on point. Sporer was on point. Geltz is, a fountain of information. I always feel like, honestly, I'm always smarter after I talk to him. He just helps see things in a way of like why players are upset or why teams aren't doing what they should be doing. It's a great interview.
Yeah, I love him. I love him. I love listening to him when I catch him on satellite radio. I feel like I'm, just like everything else, Doc, the way I look like, I feel like I'm being taken care of as a listener. That, getting information, being entertained, telling you why something happens, going to give you an opinion. You might not agree with that opinion, but it's going to base it and back that opinion up. There's nothing not to like what Brian Geltzeiler can do. Sporer was great, passionate. Yeah, I mean Russell. I mean they were all fantastic today. Ernie deserves a massive golf clap because he was great today, booking all 3 guests. And it's opening day, and we got baseball in just a tad over an hour. It gets going.
Oof, I got to check my DFS lineups when I get out of here.
And is there anything special you're doing for opening day besides all the lineups you're doing, everything like that? Is there do you have like a tradition, Doc, that you do on opening day? Like, do you have the peanuts, the Cracker Jacks, hot dog, pretzel, whatever it might be? Is there anything tradition wise that you do on opening day?
Take me out to the ball game tradition?
Yes.
No, you know what? No, it's funny. I interviewed Jim Bowden the other night, and he was the general manager of the Reds.
Yes.
And that was a day off for the whole city, right? Cincinnati it was opening day. Kids didn't go to school. I don't know. I've never really had that. I would say when I was a kid, going to the NBA draft was big for me. Going to the NFL draft was big. I like those days. Opening day, I always made sure to watch as many games as I could. I would watch the Reds game. You know how ESPN would put like 3 or 4 games on? Yeah. I would try to watch each of those, at least a piece of each of those games.
I want to remind everybody tonight, beginning at 7 Eastern time, it's MLB opening day action on Bettorcast right here. Watch the Chicago White Sox at the Houston Astros and compete in our live Q&A contest on the Bettor Sports Network app. Answer predictive questions about the game and have fun chatting with our community in real time. You can win authentic hand-signed items from your favorite athletes. Campus to Canton, that'll air on bettorsports.com starting at 7 Eastern time tonight. I'm with you. Like, today's a day you just get locked in and you watch wall-to-wall baseball. I mean, I'll be focused in a little bit more on the Yankees as they're taking on the Giants. That game gets going at 1. Right. Sandy Alcantara, Max Scherzer, tremendous pitching matchup down in Florida between the Mets and the Marlins. Be locked into that. But, yeah, I love it. Watching it all day and night. It's great.
It's like you know what? You'd mentioned the Florida Derby, right? There's the Derby, Kentucky Derby coming up. The NCAA tournament the first weekend. Where are you that Thursday and Friday? You're watching the games. Opening day. There're just certain times each year that you circle on your calendar because you're just so happy to be a part of it.
Yeah, and today is one of those days. I asked you about your best DFS play. Is there anything else out there that you love today that you're including because you're going to be finalizing your DFS lineups right after the show?
Yeah, I told you I like Max Fried over 17.5 outs. So I'm thinking he's getting into finishing the 6th inning. I like him to be an underdog for NL Cy Young of the year. I like him. Like I said, I think I like a Minnesota Twins stack for sure against Greinke. They're going to be popular, though. I like a red stack. How about that? How about a red stack against Mitch Keller and the Pirates? So give me a little Tyler Stevenson. Give me a little Jonathan India. Give me a little bit TJ Friedel. Give me a little bit, Will Benson. I could use that as what I call my sneaky stack, Moose, where I can get guys on the cheap.
Doc, you're great. Appreciate it. Great spending time with you here on opening day on this Thursday. Have a good rest of your day. Good luck with all your plays, all right?
You too. Always glad to be here with you.
You got it. We'll be back with you tomorrow morning at 10. Keep it locked right here.